This is the Kentucky Public Service Commission. My name is Michael Schmidt. I'm chairman of the commission. Seated to my right is Vice Chairman Robert Cicero, and to my left, Commissioner Talina Matthews. We are here this morning for the purpose of conducting a hearing and taking evidence pursuant to our investigation of the reasonableness of the demand-side management programs and rates of Kentucky Power Company. This is case number 2017-00097. Would counsel for the parties please stand and identify themselves and those with them here today?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mark Overstreet. I'm with the law firm of Stites and Harbison, 421 West Main Street, Frankfort, Kentucky. I'm appearing this morning on behalf of Kentucky Power Company. Also appearing with me this morning from the law firm of Stites and Harbison are Ken Gish and Katie Glass. And I also have with me company witnesses Juan Haas and Clayton.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Childers.
Good morning, Your Honor. Joe Childers. I'm here on behalf of Sierra Club and Kentucky Waterways Alliance. I have with me Jill Talbert and Matthew Miller. We have motions pending that have not been ruled on for both of those counsel to appear pro hoc vici. So I would renew our motion at this time.
Well, that motion will be sustained. I'm sorry about that.
It's
if I had
okay.
noticed it, I would have seen it was over. It would have been sustained. So those motions are sustained.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Chandler.
Good morning, Your Honor. Kent Chandler on behalf of the Attorney General's Office.
Good morning, Your Honor. Kurt Boehm, appearing on behalf of Kentucky Industrial Utility Customers.
Thank you. For staff.
Good morning, Your Honor. Quan Nguyen on behalf of Commission staff, along with Mary Beth Purvis. And if I could ask for your indiscretion, I forgot to put on my tie this morning. It's right here in my pocket. I just
I know how you feel, but I will tell you this. Based on my experience of having it happen to me one time, we'll take a 2 or 3 minute break in a minute, allow you to put it on. Okay. But I think you ought to wear your tie. Okay?
We'll do that.
All right. Before we begin, I guess I've noticed that the notice of this hearing was published and has been filed in the record.
Yes, Your Honor. We actually received that notice late Monday, affidavit that identifying that it had been published late Monday afternoon, and we got it filed yesterday morning.
I think I've got a copy of it here, so it's fine. All right. Now, is there any member of the public present who would like to make a comment before the commission, either verbally or by filing something in the record? If so, please step forward, tell us your name, address, and whatever comment we would like to make.
Thank you, Your Honor. I too did not bring a tie, but I did notice
you don't
one
need a
out
tie.
there
Only the lawyers
coat rack. I was contemplating.
Right.
So my name is Joshua Bills. I work for a community development financial institution, Mountain Association for Community Economic Development. We have an office in Hazard that's served by Kentucky Power. We have been taking advantage of any incentives that we can to pursue economic development for small businesses in the region, and we find that the commercial demand-side management programs are really essential for that work. We've helped businesses. I have a colleague here that's going to share one story with you from one business that's submitting comments on this case. It's been a real challenging for us the last couple of months because, as you all know, November 2nd, there was suspension on these programs, and we've had a number of enterprises, and these don't include just for-profit entities. We also work with churches, communities, fire departments, municipal governments, and we've had some of our enterprises that we've been working with that have been in the queue for pursuing demand-side management incentives for lighting improvements, and they've been put on hold now, those investments, just because of the uncertainty what may be going forward. So we find it unfortunate that it happened suddenly like that, and like I said, my colleague Carrie Ray is going to share a case story for you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. My name is Carrie Ray. I'm the program coordinator for Energy Efficient Enterprises, which is a program of the Mountain Association for Community Economic Development that my colleague Josh just described to you, based in Berea, Kentucky. And I'm reading a public comment from Gwen Kristen, one of our clients. She's the owner of ISOM IGA in ISOM, Kentucky, which is a Kentucky Power large general service customer, and it is a grocery store. As an owner-manager of an independent grocery store in eastern Kentucky, energy costs are extremely important to us. In this business, serving our community, margins are tight. We have to pay close attention to expenses. Electricity costs impact almost everything we do. It impacts the prices we set for groceries, how many employees we have. Ultimately, it impacts our ability to supply a necessity, food to our community. It's no secret that Kentucky Power's retail electricity charges have been increasing. We have seen our electricity costs rise alarmingly. We spent 12% more for electricity in 2015 than we did in 2010, while consuming 4% less. We achieved that energy savings by installing high-performance fluorescent lighting throughout our sales floor area. We received a modest rebate incentive from Kentucky Power, about $5,000, for making the $24,000 investment. Watching our power bill continue to rise in spite of making investments in energy efficiency gave us pause to consider what it would take to really address our electricity costs. We noticed a trend in the industry in other parts of the country where much less electricity was being used, even in stores with larger sales than ours. Digging deeper, we found we could save a lot by replacing refrigeration cases throughout the store, greatly improving the look and feel in the store, and recovering some of our wasted heat back into the building in wintertime. As such, we invested over $400,000 in 2016 for such a system. For our effort, Kentucky Power returned $6,500 of what we have been paying over the years in DSM charges. Compared to 2015, over the last year, we have realized a direct savings of 22% on our electricity costs, while achieving 42% reduction in overall energy use. We are helping our community by reducing our operating expenses. We are helping the region by using less electricity, making it available to others to use. We have been paying Kentucky Power each month for these incentives through the DSM charge. Every dollar that goes towards helping us and others reduce electricity costs is critical for this region. We have been told by consultants that under the current settlement agreement, proposed rates in Kentucky Power's current rate adjustment, case number 2017-00179, we are facing a 14% annual increase in electricity costs. In the end, investing in energy efficiency and taking advantage of the incentives available that we have paid into are critical. We are doing everything that can be done just to maintain energy costs at a steady rate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to step forward and provide a comment for the record? If not, let's take a 3-minute break so Mr. Nen can put on his tie.
Thank you, Your Honor.
That the first witness to be called would be the witness for the Sierra Club. Sierra Club initially asked to be able to present evidence and filed written testimony, so we will proceed with the Sierra Club's witness first, followed by Kentucky Power's witnesses, and as I understand it, none of the other parties have a witness, correct? Okay, thank you. All right, Ms. Tauber, do you have a witness? And if you do, please call your witness to the stand.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yes, a Sierra Club would call Mr. Jim Gravatt at this time.
Please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please be seated. Counsel, you may ask.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Gravatt. Could you please provide your full name and by whom are you employed?
Good morning. My name is James Gravatt, and I'm employed by Energy Futures Group.
Did you prepare direct testimony on behalf of Sierra Club in this case that was filed on November 22nd, 2017?
Yes, I did.
Mr. Gravatt, do you have any changes or corrections to that testimony at this time?
There are 2 corrections. The first is on page 9, line 21 at the end. It currently says, in large part due the company's, and it should say in large part due to the company's investment.
Any other correction in addition to that one?
Yes, the second correction is on page 19. Line 7 says, figure 4, error, reference source not found. If we could strike error, reference source not found, please.
Other than those corrections, Mr. Gravatt, if I asked you the same questions today, would your answers be the same as in this testimony?
Yes.
With that, Your Honor, I would offer this witness for cross-examination.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Overstreet, any questions?
Just very few, Your Honor, and good morning.
Good morning.
I just have a couple questions for clarification purposes.
Certainly.
If I could get you to turn to page 8 of your testimony, please. When you're there.
Yes.
Try to give you a line reference. At line 2 on page 8, you indicate, in my experience, targeted DSM programs are among the most effective tools that companies can offer customers who struggle with high utility bills. Do you see that?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Could you expand a little bit on what you mean by a targeted DSM program in that sentence?
Certainly. There are, in the DSM world, there are both programs that are broadly available to a wide range of customers and programs that are specifically targeted perhaps to a more narrow group of customers. One example here is the energy efficiency program that Kentucky Power offers that's done in collaboration with the low-income weatherization program, where that program, which I understand has been extended in 2018, is specifically targeted to customers whose annual incomes is below 200% of federal poverty level. There are also programs that are designed specifically to reach small business customers in a variety of jurisdictions. It being, I think, widely understood in the industry that small business customers don't have the resources that large corporations may have to both understand the opportunities to provide energy efficiency, to improve the efficiency of their facilities and their businesses. They don't necessarily have the resources. I mean, we know small business owners are working all the time just to keep the business afloat. They don't have time to sit down and do a cost-benefit analysis of what an energy efficiency investment might be. So providing some additional support to customers like those, actually such as the program that was just referenced by the public comment a moment ago, can be especially helpful, I think, in helping those customers address their bill issues.
Okay, thank you. And you anticipated my next two questions. So just to make sure I understand, the company's targeted energy efficiency program, and that's the program that the Commission has authorized the company to continue to offer in 2018, would meet your definition of targeted DSM program.
Certainly.
Okay. Now, if you could go down to the bottom of page 8 and the top of page 9, the bottom of page 8 starting on line 26, the very last line. And there you're discussing what DSM rates should include. And I think you indicate there 3 elements: program cost, lost revenue, and incentives for successful performance. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you would agree, would you not, that Kentucky Power's DSM rates are designed to recover only those 3 elements?
That is my understanding, along with any prior over or under collection. It might be adjusted by that amount, but the prior under or over collection would be made up of those 3 elements.
Okay, great. Now you anticipated my next question, and I will be quiet with that.
Mr. Chandler, Cross.
Thank you, Your Honor. Are there any, I think at least in 2 places in your testimony, on page 4 and then again on page 22, you talk about new programs for low-income customers or programs that the company may not currently offer? Mm-hmm. Are you generally aware of the income or the programs that the company does currently offer or did previously offer that are targeted to low-income customers? And of the ones that you're aware of, do you know of programs in other states that you believe may be effective in the Kentucky Power Territory they're not currently offering?
So my understanding is that currently, prior to the suspension of programs, the program that was available to low-income, specifically to low-income customers, was the Targeted Energy Efficiency Program. And as in other jurisdictions, I mean, there's a general understanding that low-income customers can participate in any programs that are available to residential customers, but the reality is that happens at a very small level because, there are obvious barriers. They're expensive. Or let's say that the low-income customers don't have the resources to do that. There are certainly a lot of different approaches, I think, that different jurisdictions use to reach their low-income customers. And, in looking at this question, it's important. I really would like to go on the record as saying that I think this has been a very important investigation, and I really commend the Commission for opening it. When I was asked to review the filings and saw the impact that the DSM surcharge, the change, I was really surprised. I'd never seen anything that dramatic of a change in other jurisdictions, and it caused me concern, too. I mean, my background is in low-income energy efficiency initially. I worked for a low-income weatherization program. I managed low-income efficiency programs for Vermont Gas, for utility in Vermont. I was the director of residential for Efficiency Vermont, where we had a strong focus on low-income programs. So with that preamble, even looking at the evaluation report that was filed by the company recently, the community outreach program, there was a recommendation to try to target that program specifically to lower income, more struggling communities and reach lower income customers through that sort of community outreach approach as opposed to just the targeted energy efficiency weatherization assistance program approach. I think that's something that's worth doing. You can do things like that if you can engage the customers in that community outreach that may provide opportunities to further engage them in other services that you can provide. Refrigerator replacement programs, refrigerator turn-ins or room air conditioner turn-ins to help those appliances become more efficient, which can have a significant effect on their electric load. There are programs in other jurisdictions that do I would call it a direct install program for low-income customers, where they might, Maryland is an example. Maryland has a program that they call the Quick Home Energy Checkup, where they do a quick energy audit, and they install efficient lighting, they install water conservation, they may do a little bit of air sealing, and they do some customer education. That program in Maryland is offered to all the residential customers, but they especially target lower-income customers. So it's not the same comprehensive approach that weatherization provides, but it's a way to reach more customers more quickly than simply the targeted program would.
Would you agree that one of the barriers of doing energy efficiency or conservation measures on customers' own, whether it's a business or a residential home, is the lack of access to capital?
Absolutely. The lack of access, the first cost barrier is huge for many customers, and it's certainly much more so for businesses that are economically challenged and for residential customers who are economically challenged. And interestingly, I mean, when we look at this service territory, and I acknowledge that it's a very economically challenged neighborhood, a long-term community, I certainly recognize that and acknowledge that there are many customers who cannot come up with the resources to make efficiency investments on their own. And I think one of the things, in looking at the broad portfolio of programs, the Targeted Energy Efficiency Program is available to customers who are at or below 200% of federal poverty level. And in Discovery, the company indicated that number of eligible customers was based purely on income was over 50,000 of their 168,000 customers. And that doesn't at all account for the customers who are just above 200% of federal poverty, who probably are also struggling, who probably also cannot come up with the initial investment to make even fairly simple energy efficiency investments, who could benefit and I believe have benefited from the company's programs.
on page 23 of your testimony, you explicitly mentioned one portion of the pending base rate case regarding the monthly residential fixed charge. Is that correct?
Yes.
What does that have to do with, in your opinion, have to do with this DSM investigation?
I think it's an issue when we just consider the structural factors that will help customers make decisions about energy efficiency. If there are going to be energy efficiency programs, it can be beneficial to the ratepayers to have a rate design that encourages energy efficient behavior. In a high fixed charge scenario, there's less incentive for customers to save energy because they're not going to save as much money. They're paying the same amount in fixed charge every month. So having a rate structure that encourages energy efficiency is important to keeping the costs of energy efficiency as low as possible. And my background, I mean, I'm from the utility world. What my training was, energy efficiency is about least cost service delivery. It's about providing energy to customers at the lowest cost possible. And so I've always carried that in my work in energy efficiency.
So would you say that on a sliding scale from having a rate that's 100% variable to having, for instance, a fixed bill, the one extreme of having a wholly variable bill would lead to more efficient energy usage?
I'm not sure I would say that absolutely, but I think that having the amount of energy that a customer uses be reflected in how much they pay will encourage more efficiency. And there are a number of utilities that are now offering dynamic pricing programs where at times when it costs the utility more to provide the energy, the ratepayer pays a higher price. And those programs are designed to encourage more conservation during those expensive times.
That's all the questions, Chairman.
Any questions?
No questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Lynn, questions?
I do, Your Honor. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Gravitt.
Good morning.
I may have to jump around just a little bit, but bear with me if you will. Can you turn to page 6 of your testimony? And it's in regards to the, it's on lines 2 through 4, with respect to the total resource cost benefit. Values that you quote there, it's 1.24 in 2016, gradually increasing to 1.72 in 2025. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And is that for all of Kentucky Power's DSM program?
That would be the portfolio.
The portfolio, okay. And did you calculate that those ratios?
I did not.
Okay. Where did you get those ratios from?
They're cited here to KPC response to first set of discovery.
Okay. And did you review the Applied Energy Group study, the 2015 Applied Energy Group study?
I did not review it in detail, but I did look at it, yes.
Okay, okay. Did that study provide any TRC scores as well with respect to Kentucky Power's DSM portfolio? Do you recall?
I don't recall. I do recall the 2016 IRP, which I did look at more recently, and it does have TRC scores that are actually somewhat higher at the portfolio level than these that are reported here in my testimony.
Okay. If you could turn now to the next page, page 7. At the bottom of the page on lines 24 through 28. And this is discussing system-wide benefits associated with cost-effective DSM programs. And you state that benefits for all of electric utilities customers could be through decreasing rates in the long term by reducing the need for expensive infrastructure development and or energy and capacity purchases. And that these costs are typically represented by avoided costs that the utilities use to measure program cost effectiveness. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So so just based on like the total resource costs calculation, would the avoided cost be a significant factor in the calculation of that ratio?
It's absolutely. It's the TRC is based on the avoided costs and the benefits that energy efficiency provides. So the calculation of avoided costs is important.
Okay. So the lower the avoided costs, the lower the cost-benefit ratio.
If the benefits
all else constant.
If all else is constant, certainly true. I will say that in a discovery, we did ask the company some questions about the makeup of their avoided costs. There are factors that are often included in avoided costs that are not included in the company's calculation. So my view is that their avoided energy and capacity aside, the overall calculation is probably conservative compared to industry best practice. And this was also referenced in the public comments that the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy filed in this case. There are benefits that are not reflected, such as infrastructure investment in transmission and distribution, spinning reserves, ancillary benefits that are required that have a cost to them. And I understand that there's an overcapacity issue here, and I don't mean to minimize that at all. That needs to be evaluated and addressed in the avoided costs. I can't speak to the development of the avoided costs. It's not something that I reviewed. I do understand that many of the local economic issues, are long-standing issues, and so I would expect to some degree that they were addressed in the current set of avoided costs. But I do understand, again, from looking at the IRP, the 2016 IRP filing, that capacity and energy costs used in that modeling have changed, and it would be appropriate to update those.
So just as a general, in general context, without reference to how an avoided cost is, calculated, the assumptions that go into the makeup of an avoided cost. If a utility has significant excess capacity and assume projected load forecasts to be stagnant at best, would that have an impact on the total resource cost calculation?
Well, I think it would definitely have an impact, yes.
All else being constant again, and what type of impact would that have on the total resource cost?
I don't think I could speculate on what the impact would be.
Would that decrease or increase, or what directional?
Directionally, in general, let me say that in general, in an environment where energy and demand are growing, energy efficiency is likely to be more cost effective, but I think it's not at all.
Could you restate that again? I'm sorry. Could you restate what you just said?
In an environment, in a growth environment, if we were in...
assuming that load is stagnant at best.
I understand, and I understand your question, sorry. And I was trying to answer it differently, because I don't want to speculate. I don't want to speculate on. In general, if energy and capacity are declining and everything else is being held constant, I would expect avoided costs to also decline.
Okay.
But I would not speculate on how much, because there are a lot of things at play. And
fair enough. Okay. And you said you've reviewed Kentucky Power's most recent IRP?
To say that I reviewed it would probably be too strong a statement.
Okay.
But I did, because there were citations to it in some of the early orders in this proceeding, I did at least want to look at what
Okay.
was said.
Well, let me ask you are you generally aware of Kentucky Power's load forecast
I'm generally aware that it's declining, yes.
across all customer sectors? If you can turn to the next page of your testimony, page 8. And I want to focus on the Arkansas 2016 Home Energy Solutions Program that you cite. Are you familiar with that program? Or how familiar are you with that program?
I'm familiar in a relatively general way.
Okay. So you didn't have any direct involvement within that? Okay. Did you review the case docket for that particular Entergy application?
I reviewed the report that Entergy Arkansas provided showing their participation costs and savings results.
Okay. Do you know what the 2016 Energy Arkansas's 2016 Home Energy Solutions Program, what type of program offering that is?
It's a comprehensive home retrofit program.
Okay. Is it targeted? Is that a targeted DSM program?
I do not believe that it is, but I'm
Okay.
not certain of that.
Okay. And you say here that the Energy Arkansas's 2016 Home Energy Solutions Program saved participants an average of 3,504 kilowatt hours per year. So, on average, each customer participating in that program saw a savings of around 3,500
On
kilowatt
average.
hours a year. Do you know what the average residential customer usage for Entergy Arkansas?
I do not.
Okay. Is that saving something that is normal based upon your past background?
I think I'm not sure that there is a normal. It certainly depends on the savings that can be achieved in a program depend on what the opportunity is, and which you suggested, how much energy are they using in the first place, and really what type of equipment is in the home, what type of technical opportunity there is to make efficiency improvements, and it can certainly be a function of cost as well. How much? I don't think it's as much necessarily a function of cost effectiveness as just overall cost and what either a homeowner or a program is putting on the table.
3,500 kWh of savings annually is a lot. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. Given that I think the average Kentucky Power customer uses, and this is not comparing Kentucky Power's average usage being similar to perhaps an Entergy Arkansas customer, but the average Kentucky Power usage is around 1,300 kWh a month. So that's a significant savings, right?
Wouldn't that be about 25% savings, and that's certainly not unheard of for a residential retrofit program that's a comprehensive program. That's been achieved in a bunch of different programs.
So that is a comprehensive program where the customer gets education through the implementation and then measurement and verification afterwards as well.
Yes.
You also provided in your testimony the recovery of lost revenues. Those lost revenues, quote-unquote lost revenues, would be recovered either through the DSM surcharge or through the energy component of a customer's bill. Is that correct?
Yes, and I think it's a very, very important point that is sometimes not fully reflected in discussions about energy efficiency costs. Lost revenues. So I'm not certain of how it works in Kentucky, but I assume it's something like this. The company will make a rate case filing. They will provide detail of what their overall fixed costs are. The commission will rule on whether that's an appropriate amount to recover or not. The company will project how much energy they think they're going to sell, and they'll divide that fixed cost by the energy, and they'll come up with a rate. So there's a component of fixed costs that they recover through their rates. The amount that the commission approves is the amount that the company is going to collect. If they sell less through DSM, that lost revenue recovery is merely making up for what they don't capture by selling energy in the fixed charge. So it's not really a cost of the program. If I use 1,000 kilowatt hours and I pay 1 cent towards fixed cost for each of those kilowatt hours, or if I use 500 kilowatt hours and I pay 2 cents for each of those kilowatt hours towards the fixed cost, I'm still paying the same amount. And I believe that that is how the lost revenue recovery works. It's intended to make up for the shortfall that occurs as a result of energy efficiency in that fixed cost recovery that's already been approved by the commission.
Okay, so if you turn now to page 16 of your testimony, Figure 3 shows sort of a breakdown of Kentucky Power's how they recover their DSM costs over the lifespan of Kentucky Power's DSM portfolio. And it shows that the total historic program costs amount to about 68%. The lost revenues account for 24%. So to the extent that if I'm trying to phrase this so that if to the extent that a program is not offered, even though the company, the utility recovers that lost revenue through the energy charge or a component of that through the customer charge, that only accounts for about 24% of that cost. The big chunk of that, those other costs are the program costs, which are about 68%. That is now no longer have to be borne by the customer. Is that correct?
Certainly.
So would you not have to take a look at the total cost involved in the implementation of the DSM program to have a better picture as to what the impact of a DSM program not being offered?
Yes, you'd have to look at the total program costs and the total program benefits. And the TRC test, in fact...
well, I just want to focus on the cost aspect right now. So just from a cost aspect, the impact of that.
So it depends a little on which test you're looking at. But the TRC, you would look at the program costs. The RIM test, which is not a test that anybody I know would recommend anybody look at, does reflect lost revenue, but they're not really costs, so it's not a meaningful test. It's not a meaningful evaluation of what the rate impact is. The utility cost test would look at program costs.
So if you take a look at the whole picture, it would be, I guess, more of a reduction if you include the program cost as well. Would that be a fair statement?
What would be more of a reduction?
Your argument is that the lost revenue is going to be recovered one way or the other, right? And if a DSM program isn't offered, the company is still going to be recovering that cost, and the customer is still going to be paying that cost. But the other factor is that 68% of those are going to be associated with the actual program cost itself, the administrative cost of implementing that program. And absent that DSM program, those customers would not be paying that additional 68% of those costs.
That is true. However, I do not believe that one can look at only the costs without also considering the benefits. Because the premise, if I may, the premise is that it costs less for customers to bear the DSM costs than it might for them to bear the other costs that would be incurred in the alternative in which they would be charged.
Sure. I mean, everything's driven by the cost-benefit analysis. If it's not cost-beneficial, then we won't, there's no discussion.
Exactly.
Okay. And just going back to the total resource cost that you had provided at the beginning of your testimony, the 1.24% in 2016 increased into, I forgot what it was in 2025, 1.27 or something like that. You said that that was provided as a response to data requests by Sierra Club, or Kentucky Power's response to a Sierra Club's data request.
Correct.
Okay. And you did not calculate, or have you calculated a TRC ratio for Kentucky Power CSM portfolio?
No, I have not.
Okay. And then if you go to lines 14 through 16 on page 16, question was, do you know what caused the increase? And this was the lost revenue amounts in 2016. It increased from an average of about 24% to 35% in 2016, and you said just based upon the data and the record, you did not have a clear sense as to what may have caused that.
Correct.
Do you have any sense at all what may have driven that increase?
It would be pure speculation, so no, I don't.
Sure. Those are all the questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Cicero, questions?
So you agree that a DSM program is designed to conserve energy? Is that basically the basic premise? Or if you can give me your own definition.
I would say that DSM programs are, I'm going to say, in general, are intended to encourage customers to take energy efficiency actions that they would not otherwise take. If they are intended to reduce the amount of energy used, but it can be at specific times or in specific locations. Yes.
And in the case of the utility, there's really no penalty to the utility because the utility is going to pass the cost of that program through to their ratepayers. Would you agree with that?
Yes. There's no penalty to I believe you're asking, correct me if I'm wrong, if the company would incur any harm as a result of offering DSM programs, and generally not, and certainly not where there's lost revenue recovery, and yes.
So when a DSM program is implemented, those that take advantage of the program will have their costs reduced, at least initially. And the costs are borne by whom?
The costs are, well, so there's two parts to that, two-part answer to that question. Because in most cases, the utility is not bearing the full cost of a project. In most cases, the customer is bearing part of the cost. In some cases, quite a large share of the cost. But the costs that the utility incurs are spread typically over the entire customer base. In some jurisdictions, it's the investment in residential programs is borne across the residential sector, and the investment in commercial industrial is borne across that sector. In other jurisdictions, it's not as precise, but it is borne across the full customer base.
So you would agree it's basically a social program? you're having ratepayers subsidize other ratepayers that take advantage of a program and telling them they should pay for it. Is that basically the premise?
Well, with all due respect, I would disagree that it's a social program. DSM was designed as a tool to allow utilities to provide least cost service to their customers, and it's cost effective on that basis. And I certainly had this discussion in other jurisdictions as well. I do not view it as a social program. I view it as, when we look at cost effectiveness testing, when we're looking at the utility cost test that reflects avoided energy and capacity and ideally ancillary services and transmission and distribution, maintenance costs and operation associated investments. Something is cost effective on the utility cost test. That means that utility dollars, ratepayer utility dollars, are less through doing energy efficiency than they would be by making other investments that would be required to provide service to the customers. So in my view, that's not a social program. That's how one tool that we use to provide least cost energy to ratepayers.
So let's go down that path. Basically avoided cost. And one of the primary avoided costs is cost of capacity. And I know you've already had your discussion with Mr. Wynn about the fact that there is an overcapacity in the region. There's no need in the foreseeable future to ever build out new capacity. There's no projection of load growth. So that avoided cost doesn't exist. And at the same time, you've got, get my thoughts straight here. At the same time that you're not avoiding cost, you have capacity that's being shuttered or shut down because they're inefficient or for whatever reason. So now we have stranded asset costs that are going to be spread over ratepayers because of no need for that capacity, and there's no need to avoid costs. So in addition to spreading the cost of the DSM program, ratepayers are also going to absorb the cost of those other stranded costs that exist out there. Would you agree with that?
That may be true. I don't know the specifics enough here to understand the cost implications of any stranded resources, but certainly if there are stranded resources, sometimes and often perhaps ratepayers do end up having to pay for some of that.
So you would agree that the cost for the ratepayer, if there are those costs that you aren't aware of, they'll have to cover those costs. It's a potential for an increase in their rate.
It would seem so.
So while they may save their costs through some implementation of a rate-saving program, in the end, they could end up with fixed costs that have to be spread over a lower volume. And therefore, even though they've saved initially on a program, in the long run, they end up paying perhaps close to the same rate.
All independent of what happens with DSM is, I think, what you're asking.
Could be independent of DSM or it could include DSM, but consumption is reduced in general. Fixed costs have to be absorbed somewhere.
Although, yes, although some of the fixed costs will reduce, I think, in relation to the operational costs declining. Some portion of them will.
But generally speaking, fixed costs for a utility in terms of operating and maintenance, you have transmission line costs that are not going to go away because while consumption may be reduced, you still have the delivery aspect of it and the customer still exists, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
So you did say you have experience with low-income programs, and generally those ratepayers have the least ability to pay their bills. They have to make decisions. We've heard a lot of testimony in other rate cases that it's a decision being made between medicine, paying their electric bill, paying their rent, whatever it is. The choices are very narrow. So those are the ones that are least likely to take part in any type of a conservation program, DSM or otherwise, just because, which is one of the reasons why the commission decided not to try to do anything with the low-income programs as far as eliminating them. But DSM programs, if they continue in other classes, those lower-income ratepayers are now subsidizing for those programs, and they're the least ones that can afford to pay it. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and I think it really emphasizes the importance of ensuring when there are DSM programs that there's access to those services by low-income ratepayers. And in many jurisdictions, in fact, that offer energy efficiency programs in general, there are certain requirements on the portfolio or on the utilities providing the programs to ensure that that the low-income ratepayers do receive sufficient services. In Pennsylvania, for example, there's a requirement that 5.5% of the portfolio savings must be attributable to low-income participation. Because I think it's possible in an environment if the focus of the energy efficiency programs was all on getting the least cost energy savings, then those low-income customers would not have the opportunity to participate because they wouldn't have the resources. You wouldn't invest in programs that cost more to provide services to low-income.
So in this particular scenario with Kentucky Power, they are required under a previous non-unanimous settlement to spend $6 million in the current period. Would you agree that when that settlement was implemented that there were no targeted programs, that it was $6 million as the necessary spend without regard to what the programs that might be to be put in place?
I actually could not answer that question. I don't know the answer. I haven't reviewed the settlement in detail to say.
I want to go back to one part of your testimony, and it refers to, and this is on page 5, it refers to and recycling refrigerators when it talks about efficiency choices. Okay? And I'm curious what recycling refrigerators has to do with energy savings. I know that you can talk about energy efficient appliances, which I believe you'd have a hard time finding a non-energy efficient appliance. And so I'm going to go back to the low-income argument again and talk about somebody that can't afford to pay their rent or their medicine because they're paying electric bill, regardless of what the cost of the appliance is or what the rebate is, probably aren't going to purchase an appliance or recycle a refrigerator. Would you agree with that?
I would agree. It's unlikely that they're going to purchase an appliance without perhaps 100% support from a program.
Right. So then I come back to those types of programs are being subsidized by low-income ratepayers because that DSM cost is in their rate. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Mr. Matthews?
Yes. You mentioned earlier that you had looked at the IRP and that some of your comments were based upon the information that was in that IRP.
I did mention
2016
that.
IRP, Kentucky
Yes.
Power.
I would not say that I reviewed it in detail.
Okay. But you looked at the energy efficiency, the DSM section, I'm assuming. Do you know when that was prepared?
I believe that it was referred to as the 2016 IRP.
So you're going to assume it was prepared likely before 2016, likely using data that was even farther in the back. And I'm just going to ask if you're aware that the economic situation in the service territory has changed rather dramatically in the last few years.
My
So that
understanding,
some of those analyses might not be accurate anymore.
my understanding from what I saw in the IRP was that the capacity and energy costs have declined considerably since the 2013 IRP, but that the overall economic decline in the region is actually something that's been ongoing. The statistics that were cited in there were the number of customers who've been lost since 2008, for example. So again, So I could not conclude that those sorts, that the general economic decline was not reflected in the 2013 or versus the 2016 IRP. I don't know.
Okay.
And I did not review the 2013 IRP.
I will ask Mr. Wanhas similar questions. I think he's intimately aware of the economic decline in that area. Are there, with this proceeding is about demand-side management programs managed by utilities and recovered through DSM charges, trackers, surcharges that recover the cost of the program, the lost revenues, and the incentives, correct? Are there other energy efficiency programs that are available to commercial, industrial, residential customers in the country?
I would say that there are some. The vast majority of energy efficiency programs of which I am aware are utility-run programs or third-party programs in states like Vermont and Oregon, but they're still funded, and New Jersey, they're still funded through utility surcharge.
And some of those are managed by a state energy program?
Almost all of them are managed by utilities.
Okay.
Vermont is an exception. New Jersey is an exception for part of the program. Some utilities also run some programs. Wisconsin is an exception, and Oregon is an exception. Most of the rest are largely utility programs.
Are you familiar with programs such as on-bill financing with a third party?
I'm aware of some, yes.
Are those effective?
I think that the evaluation record is not complete on that. There are certainly some on-bill programs. New Jersey Natural Gas, for example, offers on-bill financing to participants in the New Jersey Clean Energy Program. The New Jersey Clean Energy Program is a third-party program. The gas company offers financing, 0% interest for their customers. I think that increases the participation rate, but I don't think that we know through evaluation how much and is it worth those added costs.
But there are programs that are not traditional demand-side management programs administered by utilities that are available. And there are programs that could be implemented that would not be, as the Vice Chairman referred to, subsidized by other ratepayers in a service territory where 1/3, I believe, if I do the math very roughly in my head, approximately 1/3 of the customers are less than 200% of the poverty level.
Well, I mean, there certainly are other programs, and I think it's possible to design and try to provide other programs. They're not free, and how those costs are distributed is, that's part of the design question. You probably have heard of PACE, Property Assessed Clean Energy. It was, how long has it been? 5-8 years when that was first unveiled, and we thought this is the thing that's going to make the difference because it makes so much sense. But then, the federal financing agencies got in the way, and it's really done very little.
But there are programs that exist outside utility-run and utility finance programs. That was my point. And then when we look at the effectiveness tests, TRC, et cetera, there's a suite. Is there a difficulty in computing the effectiveness or the kilowatt hours saved in a service territory where load is declining because of other factors? A systemic decline in the economy is going to result in, families moving in together, and there's a house that has kilowatt hours and one over here that has more. There's some dynamics there that are not, some reductions in kilowatt hours that are not, that may be attributed to a program, but are likely not the result of that program.
I think typically in a scenario where a program is evaluated, and I can't say whether the AEG who does the evaluations for Kentucky Power, how they approach this, but they're a reputable firm. I know some of those folks, and I think they're competent. So my expectation would be that they would look at changes in load across the entire service territory. And if, let's say, in all residential customers, load declined 1%, then they would adjust the savings estimate for program participants by that same amount so that it would in fact be accounted for in the savings claim. That would be best practice.
But a lot of these programs are evaluated up front on a deemed savings perspective, correct?
I can't speak to the evaluation that was done in Kentucky Power Territory.
That's all the questions that I have.
I have no questions. Ms. Tauber, follow-up?
I have a few. Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Gravett, you were asked a series of questions. I'm going to maybe bounce around as well, picking up on some of them. You mentioned, I believe it was in response to a question from Kentucky Power, you spoke of both targeted and broad energy efficiency programs. Do you recall that generally? And the conversation then focused on the targeted. I just want to pick up on the broad. What benefits do you see for broad programs? So maybe programs that are not designated low-income programs, maybe programs for the broader class.
Well, I think every ratepayer should have the opportunity to save energy and to be supported in that. So, in fact, and when we look at portfolio design, it's common to have a combination of targeted programs and broad programs. And this is getting at equity concerns in a way, as well as, overall energy savings. So there are, if it's beneficial, if the cost effectiveness test says it's beneficial for the customer base as a whole to save energy, but because of the concerns about social programs, we don't want subsidization necessarily. So in design, we try to provide the opportunity for everybody to save energy, and I think that's one of the benefits of the broad programs. It's also a benefit to the system that those broadly available programs tend to be less costly on a megawatt-hour saved basis than a targeted program that's trying to overcome specific barriers for a population that's more challenged.
And I think in reference, again, to a question from counsel for the company, you discussed a Maryland program, and I want to just clarify, was that within broad energy efficiency programs and non-targeted programs, utilities can have different incentive levels for customers who are harder to reach, right? Like greater incentives for low-income customers to help them participate in these broader programs.
Certainly.
You mentioned as well how this investigation came about, that there was a pretty significant increase in DSM charges over the last year. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Was that, in your opinion, due to the cost of running DSM each year?
No. I think it's become very clear through the investigation, through my analysis, and through discovery responses from the company and other filings that the company has made, that the dramatic increase in the DSM rates was due to prior undercollection. It was due to the calculation process that the company had used. And, in my analysis, it appears that the $6 million expenditure, and based on information from the company, would really make up probably less than 2% of the rates. And actually, at the first, I believe, alternative A, scenario A that the company filed, would have been less than 1% actually of the rates to maintain that for the residential customers at that $6 million level. And when we're talking about lost revenues and costs, when we look at that, that's the total of the collection, including the lost revenue. So if we're looking at the cost, we should actually remove that lost revenue component. So it would actually be well less than 1% to maintain the $6 million DSM portfolio for the residential customers.
And the percentages are one sort of metric. To put it in dollar terms, what's your understanding if a temporary suspension were lifted and the continuing investment obligation were to exist, what would the DSM rates look like going forward?
For the residential customers, I'm going to have to do the math in my head here. So if it was $10 or $11 a month for the average customer under the high surcharge, and this is a 90% reduction, it would be somewhere between $1 and $2 a month.
And you mentioned in a couple of questions that the $6 million spending obligation. your understanding is that it's $6 million for cost-effective efficiency programs?
Absolutely. I am a staunch believer in cost effectiveness and the importance of cost effectiveness in energy efficiency programs. I do not want to advocate for putting costs on ratepayers that are not a prudent investment.
In the discussions about cost effectiveness, TRC, or total resource cost test, was discussed a lot. What does the TRC test tell you? What is that test?
The TRC test basically looks at the total cost of energy efficiency project. Let's say a project adds them up to the program level, adds the programs up to the portfolio level. So it looks at the costs, not just the cost of the incentives. Let's say, for example, in a home retrofit program, and this is not specific to Kentucky Power because I don't know what the ratios are, but let's say there's a home retrofit program that pays 20% of the costs and the customer pays 80% of the costs. It looks at both of those. It looks at the full cost, 100% of the cost, and it looks at the benefits that will be derived from those investments, and it compares them.
In a score above 1 with all these tests, the convention is above 1 means it's a cost-effective investment.
Yes. And I think it's often, there are often discussions about improving cost effectiveness. And again, I completely agree that making programs, as efficient and effective as possible is important, but cost effective is cost effective. If it's 1.1 or if it's 1.5 or 2, you're still making money through that investment.
You spoke about the system-wide benefits of efficiency, and there were some questions about the current system picture for the company, namely their position on capacity and energy, load. What role do you see for efficiency if growth is not projected in load?
Well, we've talked a bunch now about the benefits that participants can achieve. We've heard about small businesses. I noted on the list of suspended projects that the company provided in Discovery recently, there were medical facilities, there were schools, there was a water district. There are a lot of sort of entities that serve public purposes who were benefiting from these programs. So I think that's really quite clear. I guess I always shy away from saying I've been doing this for a long time, but when I started out at the gas company in 1993, and in Vermont it was 60 cents a therm, and then it, over a span of years doubled and tripled, and then it's gone back down again. So I'm always wary of I wouldn't dispute the projections about lack of growth here, but what the future is going to bring for energy, I don't think is certain. I think anybody who thinks they know exactly what's going to happen, things change in this world. So, the company in their IRP talked about the generation resources, the capacity resources. One of those contracts is up in 2022. The presumption is that that'll be extended, but that's not done yet. Well, what's going to happen there? Could something change in the scenario? Could a different amount, could it be more cost effective to acquire a smaller amount of energy there by doing DSM than by just continuing to buy supply capacity? I don't know the answer, but I think that DSM provides an important tool to keep options open. Again, not exactly the scenario here, but one of the interesting things in a study that we did about using energy efficiency to defer transmission and distribution investments was with Con Edison in greater New York City area. And what the program manager said to us after they had done these programs to defer construction, he said, it actually turned out we never needed that in the first place, and we didn't know. We found that out over time, and if we hadn't done the energy efficiency, we would have gone and made all those investments, and the ratepayers would have paid for them, and it would have been unnecessary. So I think it's really an important tool in managing load and managing options so that we can continue to provide the lowest cost service to the ratepayers.
In that specific, not to focus on the Con Ed example, but those system benefits, those would be benefits to customers, both who participate in the program and get the immediate bill savings, but also those who don't and just have a lower cost system to pay for it. Is
Absolutely.
that right? Okay. And then I think this is my last question, and I appreciate the opportunity to follow up on your cross-examination. You talked a bit about, and certainly questions were focusing in on, some of the challenges of KCP service territory, your background in low-income energy efficiency work specifically. How can energy efficiency help with this particular service territory, with KCP's service territory?
I think one opportunity, and I can't speak to how much this has been used, but we talked about the community outreach program as a way to reach a broader cross-section of those customers with some efficiency services. I think continuing the targeted energy efficiency program, perhaps trying to find ways to do more through that program, but also looking at other types of programs that, such as expanded community outreach, that's really focused on this population that's struggling. Programs like the Quick Home Energy Checkup that I mentioned that they do in Maryland, which is a considerably lower cost program to deliver than a comprehensive home retrofit program, but can get significant savings for lower income customers. Energy education, I would really recommend putting some thought into what are the kinds of specific programs for customers who are most in need in Kentucky Power service territory.
Thank you, Mr. Gravatt. And my last question is, you were asked a series of questions about a figure you had in your testimony breaking down the cost of energy efficiency for the company, so cost, revenues, incentive, program costs. And the program costs were roughly two-thirds. And I think there was a series of questions about if the program suspension were to continue and those costs were not incurred, that could be a benefit. And I just want to, your view is you would have to look at the reduction of costs as well as the benefits that would now be not provided. Is that right?
Absolutely. It's not reasonable to only look at the costs. If you save money here, but it costs you more money over here, then you're not saving money.
No further questions. Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Just a couple, Your Honor. Mr. Gravatt, the Attorney General asked you some questions about your testimony on page 23 concerning the company's proposal in the pending rate case concerning the service charge. Are you aware of, I'm sorry, I don't mean to rush you, just let me know when you get there.
23.
23, okay. Are you aware that company witness Vaughn in that case indicated, based upon the two studies conducted by the company, that the residential service charge would have to be $38 a month to recover fully the fixed distribution cost associated with providing residential service?
I can't say that I recall the specific numbers, but I will take your word for that. Yes, I do recall the testimony discussion.
Yes. And are you also aware that in the company's application in that case, it proposed to increase that residential service charge to $17.50 per month? So there is still a very substantial amount of those fixed costs that reside in the energy charge, and that would give all customers an incentive to save energy.
Understood.
Yes, okay. And then did you see in Mr. Vaughn's testimony the fact, and this may be unique to Kentucky Power Service territory or not, I don't know, but that among Kentucky Power's low-income customers, many tend to be high energy users.
Yes.
And that's because of the nature of the housing stock and whatnot. And so that to the extent the service charge doesn't fully recover all fixed costs, those low-income customers are subsidizing perhaps people who have vacation homes in the service territory and who don't use energy as regularly and at such a high level.
I couldn't really respond to that.
All right, and then just one other question on that topic. And are you aware that after the company filed its application, it entered into negotiations, and there's a partial settlement proposal pending before the commission that would reduce the proposal to increase the fixed service charge, and now the settlement would provide for a $14 a month fixed service charge?
I was not aware of that.
Okay. And then Mr. Nguyen was asking you some questions about the company's capacity. And then in redirect by Ms. Tauber, you were talking about the company's IRP and the fact that the Rockport unit power agreement is scheduled to expire in, I think it's December 7th, 2022. Are you aware of that?
I do recall reading that, yes.
And you indicated, and I just want to make sure the record's clear, that the IRP was based on the assumption that that agreement would be extended.
That's my understanding, yes.
But the IRP also said that no decision had been made, and that would be addressed at least in the next IRP.
Yes.
And then you talked about changing circumstances. Do you remember that?
I do.
And are you aware that the parties from whom Kentucky Power receives energy from Rockport Unit 2 have notified the owner of Rockport Unit 2 that they don't intend to extend the lease past 2022?
No, I'm not at all.
But if that were the case, would that be one of those changing circumstances?
Certainly, and if I may, I mean, I would not, certainly did not intend, and I certainly do not have sufficient information to speculate about what might happen in Kentucky Power's territory or with the generation mix, the capacity mix. My point only is that things change and we don't always anticipate them, and it's risky to bank on a scenario, a single scenario, that may or may not come to pass.
So while Kentucky Power may be in a long position now, that could change in 2022.
It could.
And are you aware of the fact that since Kentucky Power filed its IRP, that there have been announcements of two large industries locating in Kentucky Power service territory?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay. One of them is Brady Industries, and I think it's projecting a load of 70 megawatts starting in 2022. And that another one is Interblue. I think it'll be in Pikeville, and that'll be a load of 25 megawatts. So that the Kentucky Power's length and capacity now could change.
It would appear so, and that's great news.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Are we litigating the rate case, or are we?
I was just trying to address Mr. Chandler's effort.
Any recall?
I have a couple things I'd like to say. I'll keep it short, though. You mentioned that DSM, I think the quote was that you believe it's a tool to keep the options open. Is that right?
In an environment where there's a lot of uncertainty, I think, yes, it's a tool to keep options open.
Is it your understanding that the $6 million number, $6 million amount that was the floor for DSM spending is an operative amount? Is that a amount that came about through studies about the company, or do you know how that amount came about?
I do not.
Would it surprise you to find out that the $6 million amount came about through a non-unanimous settlement between Sierra Club?
I'm sorry, I understood that it came about through the settlement, but I don't know how the number was arrived at.
And do you know how much Kentucky Power was spending on DSM prior to
the agreement?
My recollection from looking at some trends over time was it was prior to the settlement, I thought it was around $3 million a year. It had been my recollection is it had been ramping up even prior to the settlement.
Do you mind to go to a page, just to think towards your recollection, go to page 10 of your testimony?
Yes.
And so would you agree that from the time period between 2008 and 2009, from that time period forward up until the settlement in 2013, that the amount that the company, the total program cost and the total program cost, lost revenues and incentives were already increasing?
Certainly.
And just generally, you mentioned earlier that DSM spending and DSM programs, they differ by each and every utility. Is that correct?
Sure.
There's no real general rule about, I guess it all takes into account unique characteristics of each utility, such as the avoided cost, load growth, number of customers, those sort of things.
All of that and the regulatory environment and not just regulatory, but the direction provided by legislatures.
And so you talk about cost effectiveness and that whatever money is spent, and I believe that the terms of the $6 million state that it has to be spent on cost-effective DSM. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
And so depending on any decision, is a number of 3 or 4 or 2 or 10, are they any more or less reasonable than a $6 million amount?
Well, in my view, when we're speaking about what's a reasonable amount to invest, my default is all cost effective, because if it's returning a benefit, then why wouldn't we do that? And then we have to counter that by rate impact and are there other opportunities to invest that could return a better rate? But so is it fair to say no spending unless it's cost effective, and then you don't spend outside of the amount? You don't keep spending when the spending may be outside of the cost effectiveness, is what you're saying? Correct.
So there's a band there of what's available in your opinion.
Yes.
And it should be up to the regulator as to essentially how much the rates recover there, how much is charged to customers.
Yes.
Without an EM and V study, is there any way to determine whether the current targeted low-income program is cost-effective?
My understanding is that the only way you could do it would be making some assumptions about the avoided costs, in recognizing that they are likely to have changed since they were last calculated. So I'm not sure how you would do it.
And with new announcements, such as, with any changes to load or any changes to costs, those assumptions could vary, maybe even monthly.
They could. I think that's it's pretty challenging to do analysis on that basis. So industry best practices, we update avoided costs regularly, every probably year or two, depending on what kind of changes there are in the environment. There's a cost to updating the avoided costs, as we well know, and doing the analysis. So that has to be balanced against how much they're changing and how imperative it is. And I suppose, one of the points that I tried to make earlier is that we look at the avoided costs that, what's included in the avoided costs here, I'd say generally they're fairly conservative. So even if the energy and capacity is going down, and so then we would conclude that the cost effectiveness would go down, but there's other mitigating things. So a lot of the question for me is how much sensitivity do we think we have here? If we have an avoided cost or a TRC result of 1.5, if it's going to go down to 1.3, is that still worth doing? Well, it is. So, if there are small changes, we don't necessarily need to update with that kind of frequency. But when we see that there are significant changes, then it's worth it to update them.
But if a low income, say a low income program was to continue going forward for multiple years, do you think it would be necessary to properly determine whether that was still cost effective and to properly recover those costs that an EM&V would be necessary or would be prudent?
I think with low-income programs in particular, commissions often make some allowance for the program to not meet the strict cost-effectiveness criteria that a portfolio in general would be expected to meet. So I think that is a question that the commission could decide on, certainly. How important is it that the low-income program meet the cost-effectiveness criteria in the TRC specifically? If the commission decided that that was critical, again, my view is it makes sense to look at these things maybe every 2 or 3 years on a planning cycle, whatever that planning cycle may be, because the costs of doing the analysis all the time and the not being able to provide a stable information to the market and to the customers, there are costs associated with that as well. I think those costs outweigh the benefit of doing it with a lot of frequency. Does that answer your question?
I believe so. Thank you. That's all the questions I have, Chairman.
No questions, Your Honor.
Mr.
No further
Moore?
questions, Your Honor.
Commissioner Cicero?
So just to follow up on the Attorney General's comments, as long as a program is cost competitive, then it should be evaluated for use in the DSM program. But there's no magical number about 2 million, 4 million, 6 million, 10 million, or any other number. It should be based on the value of the program.
Correct.
I guess that's all I have.
Mr. Matthews?
I just want to think about your math here. You said the $6 million program cost would be about 1% of the current DSM charge if it were to go forward in the next year?
Not 1% of the DSM charge, 1% of the rate, the residential rate.
So you weren't referring to 1% of the $10.56 that was charged prior to the commission's last order? Okay. And was that based on your expectations about what the future rate is, or?
It's based on.
Because we do have that other thing that's hanging out here.
Yeah. It's based on quick math on the fly of the filing that the company made in November when they proposed alternative or scenario, I can't remember which the term they used, A, which would be maintaining the $6 million investment, and that the surcharge would be about 1/10 of what it has been recently.
Okay. I have no further questions.
I have no questions. There's nothing further for this witness. May the witness be excused.
Yes, I have just two for clarification on redirect. I promise it would be based on the recross, and I promise to be quick if you would permit.
All right.
Thank you. Just one quick clarification and then a follow-up. Not to delve into the rate case by any measure, counsel for the company mentioned a company study that found roughly $34 or something in fixed charge. I just want to confirm, you have not reviewed that study?
Correct, I have not.
Okay. Quick other, you mentioned your recommendation would be to pursue all cost-effective energy efficiency resources. And just to clarify, to determine that, your recommendation would be to look at all the benefits that are accrued from efficiency. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then just very briefly, I think you just mentioned it in response to the commissioner that your analysis that to maintain spending levels pre-suspension, it would cost the company significantly less, going from $10 to between $1 and $2. You referenced quick math on the fly, but I just want to confirm that was your analysis was confirmed by the company's filing. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
So the company's filing in the record shows that significant reduction in cost. Okay. No further questions. Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Anything further? Mr. Matthews?
And that calculation that you just referenced, did that include the over-recovery that the company is faced with right now that they're giving back to customers?
It was purely based on the surcharge, the residential surcharge that the company proposed as part of, if the commission were to direct them to implement alternative A to maintain the programs. The surcharge amount that they provided, that they estimated that would be.
And did that include any refund back to customers of the over-recovery?
Frankly, I did not analyze the surcharge.
I will ask Mr. Wanhouse.
May this witness be excused? We're not going to have any more questions. Okay? May the witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor. And I would ask that his testimony be admitted when appropriate.
Oh, yes, sure.
Thank you.
You may step down. Thank you.
Are we going to proceed?
Yes.
Okay, I would call Mr. Clayton to the stand.
Thank you. Mr. Clayton, will you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you. You may be seated. Counsel, you may ask.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Clayton, please state your name, position, and business address.
E.J. Clayton. My position is Energy Efficiency and Consumer Programs Manager for Kentucky Power Company, and I work at 855 Central Avenue, Ashland, Kentucky.
And Mr. Clayton, did you file certain responses to data requests in this proceeding?
I did.
And were those limited to the Sierra Club data request?
They were.
And did you file any testimony in this proceeding?
I did not.
And so if you were asked the same data request questions today that you responded to previously, would your answers be the same?
They would.
And you have no corrections to those responses?
No corrections.
The witness is available.
Top questions?
Thank you, Your Honor. No questions based on the discovery responses.
Mr. Chandler?
The Attorney General knows no questions, Mr. Clayton.
No questions, Your Honor. Mr. Nguyen?
We don't have any questions, Your Honor.
Commissioner Cicero?
Just a couple of questions. You are part of the overhead that Kentucky Power pays in order to administer the DSM program?
I'm an employee of Kentucky Power and employed in that function.
Do you have any other responsibilities or duties outside of the DSM program?
I support other company initiatives as assigned.
Could you give me a percentage of your responsibilities between DSM and other functions that they assign to you?
It would be a very small percentage, probably. I don't have an exact percentage, sir. Maybe 10%, 15%.
Would your job exist if there was no DSM program?
No.
Thank you. I have no other questions.
Mr. Matthews?
I have none.
I have no questions.
No
Yes,
questions.
May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may step down.
Thank you.
And we would call Mr. Wanhouse at this
Why
time.
don't we take a 10-minute break until quarter till 11, and then we can finish up. Was he the last witness?
He's
Mr.
our
Wanhouse?
last witness, Your Honor.
Okay, we'll be in recess until 15 minutes until 11 o'clock. Nothing but the truth.
Yes, sir.
Please be seated. Counsel, you may ask.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wanhouse, please state your name, position, and business address for the record.
My name is Rainey Wanhouse. I'm the Managing Director of Regulatory and Finance for Kentucky Power Company. My address is 855 Central Avenue, Ashland, Kentucky.
And Mr. Wanhouse, did you adopt last month responses made by a former company witness to the staff's first set of data requests?
I did.
And did you cause to be filed in this record additional data request responses?
Yes.
And have you filed rebuttal and supplemental testimony in the record?
I have.
Do you have any corrections or updates to any of those?
I do not.
And if you were asked those same questions here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
I have no further.
Ms. Talbot, questions?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Wanhouse.
Good morning.
I have a few questions for you. Mr. Wanhouse, you've been involved in other DSM cases, is that right?
Yes,
And you were also involved in the Mitchell transfer case, is that right?
I was.
Okay. And so you're aware of the DSM term and the settlement agreement?
I am.
Okay. I just want to refer you to page 3 of your rebuttal testimony, if I could. And let's see here. Starting on line 20 and going on to page 4, you describe the settlement agreement. Do you see that?
Yes.
And you mentioned the $6 million spend by 2016 and the maintenance of that level through 2018 and beyond. Do you generally, I'm admittedly paraphrasing, but.
Yes, that's correct.
And I just want to clarify, it's been discussed prior, but you understand the settlement agreement was for $6 million in cost-effective DSM?
Yes.
Okay. Great. And you generally understand that cost-effective means the benefits outweigh the costs?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Winehouse, is it your understanding that the commission initiated this investigation, at least in part due to the increase in DSM rates to over $10 a month for residential customers?
Yes. I mean, the monthly factor that was going to be used during 2017 had increased to where it had been an average of $10, and they opened the investigation to make sure of the reasonableness of the costs and such, yes, in the programs.
And you would agree that that increase to over $10, that was a pretty big jump from the year prior?
Oh, yeah, we saw that increase as well, and also because of that increase, looked at ways that we were going to file in 2017 to especially change the way the factor was calculated based on the Schedule C that was done as a way to try, because there never has been in this case, to my recollection, an issue about the cost or that something was incorrect, or from that standpoint, it was the fact that due to the large under recovery that had to be recovered and what created that. So we were working to come up with a new methodology to work towards not having such a roller coaster type of effect.
Okay, and you anticipated my next question, which was that you would agree that this increase was driven by those past under recoveries that you spoke about?
Yes, it would largely by two facts: the under recoveries, and then the estimated kilowatt hours that was used prior to that created that large over recovery was, due to a decrease in load overall, and so your estimates, if you have a proper factor but you still have decreased kilowatt hours, then you're going to under recover.
And Mr. Winehouse, the company has provided in the November 15th report that these under recoveries for the residential program, they've been recovered as of September of last year. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So setting aside that under recovery, which has now been recovered, the $10 plus charge, that doesn't reflect the cost to fund DSM programs for residential customers in a given year, right?
No, it does not. I mean, as everyone realizes, there's, as you come up with an annual factor that we've used, you start with whatever you have over or under recovered, but then you look at the program costs, the actual that you've incurred, the estimated for a period of time, and put those in effect. So with in the factors that we filed in December of 21st and also December 28th, it shows that those, for the residential, that we're starting at a very different position now for 2017. The commercial was still in an under recovery position as we started, but the residential had been evaporated.
Okay. And you mentioned this, but I just wanted to clarify, the company, in response to this investigation, the company has, or during the pendency of this investigation, the company has modified its DSM rate calculation methodology. Is that right?
Yes, and what we filed initially in November, where we provided as was said, A or B alternative scenario. With that, we had a new methodology that we didn't have use in filings in December as well.
And that methodology is in part designed to reduce some of the, I think you called it roller coaster, some of
It's
the volatility?
fully for that purposes.
Okay.
There's some changes of the months and how, that is determined, but, the whole purpose of changing that was to eliminate the roller coaster.
And by roller coaster, it would be designed to eliminate the under recoveries that had occurred in the past.
To minimize it. To say eliminates, you can't do that because it's not a perfect world. You will always have, based on your estimate, an over and under recovery, but it is to mitigate, how deep of change you have from year to year.
And so using that revised DSM rate calculation for the company's November 15th filing, the alternative A that was presented, that was an option for continuing DSM in 2018 at the pre-suspension investment levels. Is that right? So $6 million roughly on cost-effective DSM. Is that correct?
Yes.
And to do that, the company's projections is that it would cost $1.28 a month for residential customers.
With the numbers that were used at that time, that was the correct numbers, yes.
And that is roughly, I will not get out the calculator, but would you agree roughly an 88% reduction from the monthly residential charge as it existed when this investigation was open?
Yes.
Okay. In your supplemental testimony filed yesterday, you briefly addressed lost revenues generally. Do you recall generally addressing lost revenues? I just want to, and were you here for the testimony of Mr. Gravatt?
I was.
And you heard him talk about how those lost revenues would be recovered in a non-DSM scenario?
Yes.
And you agree with that?
I do.
Okay. So they would either be just revenues or lost revenues?
Correct.
In response to the initial set of discovery that was propounded as this investigation opened, and I understand you sponsored those discovery responses, the company provided information pertaining to its current capacity and capacity position in response to number one. Are you generally familiar with the company's capacity?
I am.
Okay. And so the response indicated that there is in 2016, a net capacity of 104 megawatts roughly. Does that sound right to you?
It does. And maybe put it in terms that we talk about quite often, that would say you had a reserve margin of, I think for that calculation, it was like 21% or something.
Now, the Rockport contract, which was mentioned earlier in this hearing, amounts to just under 400 megawatts,
393 megawatts, yes.
And so if that contract terminates in 2022, that's 393 taken offline effectively for the company. Is that right?
That would be correct.
Okay. And counsel for the company in questioning of Mr. Gravatt mentioned potentially additional customers coming online in the industrial class. Do you recall that?
I do.
And that would amount to roughly 90 megawatts?
And I think that, and maybe restate a few things. All right, so the Brady, what we've been public saying, because that's all we know really, is it was to be 55 megawatts.
Okay.
They hope to be greater, but what we know from right now, and until they go to production, public we're saying 55 megawatts, and then the 25 megawatts for the Interblue. So I'd say that is 80 megawatts is, and I think that's a conservative, but we're hoping for more, but that would be the load increase that we would be projecting. And we've also had some a concrete that's went into just recently, which is another 5 megawatts. So we're having a lot of successes. Vice Chairman Cicero mentioned earlier the idea of we're basically at the 2016 IRP. He's correct. We are, if you look at that data, we are flat, maybe even losing, as far as growth. But to what Mr. Gravatt said, things are changing. And, we've had a very successful 2017, and things are positive. Now, that load isn't online yet. All right, they're building, they're constructing, but it's going to be basically 2020 before it gets here. But, you know, we also have other things they're in the pipeline right now that we're continuing to work on to try to fill that space that I think, you know, Vice Chairman Cicero also mentioned about, he called it stranded. I wouldn't call it stranded investment, but it's it's investment that for generation, transmission, and distribution that we spent and we put in, and at a time, you know, if I go back 10 years, was fully utilized. You know, we were right around our reserve margin, and you always try to be there. And if growth is happening, we always tried to build in advance for those expectations. But then, you know, true to his comment also is the fact that currently we are not at that level. You know, there is investment out there that, you know, is not truly used. You know, I respectfully wouldn't call it stranded, but it's fixed costs that's not being fully utilized. But our hope is, and where we want to go, is to fill that gap with this new load, and, you know, it's why we've also could see the continuation of DSM in some manner, because if you stop it, all right, you know, Mr. Clayton and his team would use them in other positions because you would need 3 people that's in the DSM group managing one program. So to go down the road and let's say we are there, you know, we accomplished what we want to do in getting the load back. To restart at some other point in time, you know, you'd have to ramp up, and it would be hard to do. And so, though we fully understand, appreciate the concerns around the residential, especially the low income, you know, on a couple occasions during this case, you know, we offered up the idea of moving more to the commercial. And we saw from statements made by the public, you know, that, you know, the commercial seems to be much more able to and need these programs right now. And so maybe we switch and create a portfolio that's much different than we have today. And so that's where we'd like to see it to go if possible.
Now, in terms of cost-effectiveness studies that's been, or cost-effective analysis that's been discussed in this hearing quite a bit, if, for example, if Rockport wasn't renewed, that could impact the cost-effectiveness analysis of efficiency, right?
I don't know for sure. You know, I am not, the DSM did fall under me, and EJ reported to me up until April, but I'm not involved in the actual TRC calculations. So for me to say that it would or wouldn't, I'm not knowledgeable enough to know.
But you know that, as we discussed, among the benefits considered, it would be avoided capacity, avoided energy, and others. Is that right?
Yeah, in general, but if we don't renew the Rockport, like right now, we would still have to, we may not have to, if load would not change, though we're expecting it to, but let's say that it stayed at the level we filed in the 16 plan, I don't need 393 megawatts, but I probably need 200. So, I've got to go out and somehow acquire, build, market, whatever, 200 megawatts or whatever it is. So something is going to replace the Rockport. So just to say because you lose Rockport, it changes the cost effectiveness, I think that's being too assumptuous.
You mentioned the need to build resources in advance, to do advanced long-term planning. Would you agree that that's important?
It is.
Okay. And if that's the case with DSM as well, would you agree?
Yes. I mean, that's, if we are going to get the growth that we're pushing towards and again, the premise behind the reason of DSM being here, I think, is stated by and most people, was the idea of being able to offset having to have that next more expensive generation. Well, we are in across a lot of areas don't have that large growth potentials. So there does need to be a little bit of a switch as to how you do some things, because even though we're getting growth, we're still not up to that level that we were at one time. So maybe there's other areas, but besides just offsetting that next generation growth, that we need to be looking at it in the future.
And again, I mean, if it's a cost-effective investment in DSM, your understanding is the benefits outweigh the costs, right?
Yes, in all of our programs that we've ever used, we've never went to the commission with a program to approve that wasn't above the TRC of 1.0. I will say that, we had a couple programs, it's been quite a few years ago, that was looked at, had kind of slipped below the 1.0, but they were programs that had a lot of benefit to the low income. And we provided that to the commission and said, hey, it's there, but there just seems to be a need for that. And it went on for a while, even though, but for the most part, if it's not above 1, we do not even have that come before the commission for approval.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Chandler, questions?
Just a couple, thank you. Are you aware of the public comment filed by the Kentucky School Board Association in the last couple of days?
I read it last night, yes.
And do you have any reason to believe that any of the comments in that are untrue?
Not at all.
There's a particular line that I kind of want to get your take on. The public comment stated...
Excuse me, Mr. Chandler, do you have that in front
I
of you?
do have it. If you
Okay.
would give me a second to get to it, please.
I was just going to ask you, when you get there, a question about the second page in that final paragraph.
I know I put it, there it is.
Can
I know I put it, I found it. All right, thank you.
Well, and so I'm going to be asking you about it and how it relates to some of your supplemental rebuttal, I guess, I think is how it was titled. But the second line there states, in conducting the review, KSBA respectfully requests the Commission recognize the district's expectation of rebate receipt upon project completion and the value of the benefit of these programs, and it goes forward. In your rebuttal, you explicitly discuss and I believe it's also addressed in the attachment 2.2 that you've recently uploaded, that many of the programs, the customer will complete the, say it's complete the project. We'll just keep it very general. Complete the project and then come to Kentucky Power for reimbursement. Is that correct? Or can you explain that process?
Yeah, I think if I can take a few minutes and kind of explain this, I think it'll help.
Thank you.
Prior to what's happened in 2017, if you had a program that customer would have to submit an application to be a part of, each year we had a budget, a target amount that we would put together, file with the commission saying, here's our targeted spend level and such. And as a contractors would then administer that program, like anything, and let's just say for a particular program that it had $1 million as its budget amount to spend. So let's just take new construction, because that's one of the ones that under the commercial. And when that $1 million was fully subscribed, or we had customers that said they want to do projects that fell under that, what we would do is, put, for those that we would keep taking applications, because to another question that Vice Chairman Cicero mentioned about, the $6 million and was it earmarked in the settlement towards any type of special programs and such, and the answer to that was no. It was a total $6 million spend. And so we would come up with some type of budget to spend it, but when we saw there was one program that was being more effective and and being used by the customers, we would shift money, because the settlement said $6 million in general. And so for this, so what we would do is when we would oversubscribe a certain, like the new construction, we'd tell them it was oversubscribed, but then we would go find the money and we would pay them. So now let's shift to 2017. We started out that way the first of the year. The case was initiated, and then in the order that came out in May, I believe, but it basically said that within a particular program, you couldn't expend you couldn't go over the cost of a program. So for us, that meant I had, now I did have, if I had that $1 million as my budget amount, that was the most I could spend. And so we passed that on, but what would happen is, because there was a lot of things, some were even already oversubscribed. They had passed their budget, but we stopped them. So what we did is, when customers would come and want to participate in a program, and we would say, well, here's what we got going on. The commission has suspended that or put a cap on that, and I can't guarantee, and we were very explicit, that we can pay these funds to you because of what we interpret the order to be. And they were put on a wait list. And many of those customers, because of our past practice of always getting money to them because it was, trying to work and to increase the DSM expenditures and help with them improving their conserving of energy and such, they understood that risk and continued with the program. And we have, in the filing that we did on December 21st, we had rates in there that would have the Schedule C and the factor would have reimbursed all of those customers for that, and that's what we were asking for approval. The commission then, in the order, or that came out on the 21st, that said, no, you have to eliminate the wait list and the evaluation costs, and we did such, but they said, we'll consider that for rehearing. And so these customers, sorry for taking so long to explain this, but these customers, like the school board and like others, this isn't the first year they've used our programs. The schools, and I think that's why, use our programs extensively. EJ and his team, they constantly are out there with the schools trying to figure out for them better ways to manage their energy costs. So there's a history that we've always come through with it. So and that's why they're stating the things that they're stating in that letter, even though we've told them it's not guaranteed, the expectation, and we would like to fulfill it because they see that this is, a good product. This is good for their schools. And then sometimes it would roll over to the next year. We wouldn't roll over the budget, but we'd pay it out in the following year. So, they see a history because they've used our programs in the past, and even though they were told there wasn't a guarantee, they would like to see those payments.
You mentioned earlier, and I think the quote was that you like to create a portfolio that's much different. You would like to that you could. There's the opportunity, or you would, that quote, to create a portfolio that's much different than we have today. That you may be open. That Kentucky Power may be open to that. Is that correct?
Sure. We hear, in the rate case we heard it. We hear it here that we have, and it's been stated earlier today, a customer base that, as one calculation was made, over 50% is, over 200%. And, we consider them as low income. That's huge, and, we've tried to do a lot of efforts recently to mitigate some of that. And in this DSM, I think one of the things we offered at an informal conference, a couple of things, was to change the rate earlier this year, or in 16, if possible, to get credit sooner. We also, the idea of switching a lot of the cost, taking that $6 million bogey that we was established in the Mitchell settlement and saying, okay, and it was split, we split between residential and commercial offered up that we move more towards the commercial, because the commercial programs and the commercial customers seem to be, still willing to invest and enable could where the residential couldn't. And then there's, what we've heard lately, the idea of targeted, the TEE program that has been continued for 18 is targeted towards the low income. So that portfolio is part of what we've said, if we're going to move forward to provide something for 2019, that could be what we do as residential is have more targeted type of programs and work to come to that, which is why the evaluation cost that currently is not in the factor is so important, because those evaluations will look at the existing programs, right? Because those existing programs, 3 years ago had a TRC that said they were cost effective, but there were also new programs that we looked in that based on estimates and such that said they should be cost effective, and here's the numbers. Without the evaluation, without the consulting to evaluation being completed, we're not going to know that. I think Sierra Club wouldn't describe it. You mentioned that it would be very hard. There'd be so many assumptions. So with that, number one, we had estimates of what was cost effective. The actual data will then prove whether they were or were not cost effective. And just because a program in the residential is cost effective, maybe it's not the right program going forward. If we're going to go more towards programs on the residential that are targeted towards the low income, you have a program that's, say replacing a heat pump, and I just use that as an example, that's costly. You get a rebate of maybe $500, and the heat pump costs you $4,000 for a low income individual. How can they make up to $3,500? And we've talked about that. So, yes, there can be, the portfolio can be changed. What I stated in the supplemental testimony is that, I think as, looking guidance from the commission and such, that where do we want to go? How do we want to go? Do we want to have programs in 2019? And do we want to have commercial? Do we want to have targeted? If as long as we agree on what that is, and the idea that the cost and the lost revenues will continue to be recovered, we'll work towards that. It's a long-winded answer, and I apologize to explain that.
To Commissioner Matthews' question earlier, would the company be open to providing on-bill financing for particular energy efficiency projects?
I'll say that it could be considered. We had some. I have some history that we had some financing of some water heaters back in the 90s. It wasn't very successful. And, it's not that you can't do it, but it's administration and such. We're 20 years down the road for that. Maybe there's a better way, and we've learned from some things to do that. So I think it's an option. I won't say that we, would want to go that way, but it definitely is an option.
Was that previous foray into on-bill financing for residential customers or for commercial customers?
I don't remember. It was mainly residential. I'm not saying commercial couldn't, because it was around water heaters and such. I just don't remember.
But it wasn't like a target, as you remember, it wasn't targeted for commercial customers.
No.
Is it your understanding over the past few years? As you understand it, over the past few years, has Kentucky Power, in what season has Kentucky Power peaked?
Kentucky Power is a winter peaker.
And that's consistent?
It's, as long as I've been here, it's winter. And you sometimes ask why, and it's because of, a lot of it has to do with our low-income customers. A lot of them have housing, mobile homes, whatever, that they have to have heat, but they don't have to have air conditioning. So, they have resistance heats and such. So, we don't have a large saturation of air conditioning, because of where, what we have. So it tends to be a winter peaker.
And Kentucky Power is a member of PJM, correct?
Yes.
And is it your understanding, is PJM a winter or a summer peaking entity?
Summer.
And does that provide issues for Kentucky Power's cost effectiveness? Does that provide any issues, or is that a benefit for Kentucky Power in DSM programming?
I don't think it's either.
That's all the questions I have, Chairman.
Mr. Van,
No questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Nguyen?
Yes, Your Honor, just some questions. Good morning still, Mr. Wallace.
Still this morning, yes.
If we can start with the Targeted Energy Efficiency Program, when was that first implemented by Kentucky Power?
Oh,
Been a while?
it's been a while, but yeah, I don't remember.
Okay. Have you all received, has the company received any feedback from those customers who participated in that program throughout those years?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a well-received program. I will say that we've made a lot of efforts to advertise and to try to get customers to take advantage of these programs. And sometimes it's been like pulling teeth, but a lot of it has to do, with their cost limitations, financial limitations, but, we've really pushed hard, but we've had a pretty good success with targeted energy efficiency.
Okay. In terms of participation as well as the
Yes.
effectiveness. And I think based upon the company's response to staff's data requests that the TRC score for the program was a 1.08. Is that correct? Do you recall?
I don't recall. I know it was above 1, 'cause we
Okay.
don't, but I'll take your word it was 1.08.
Okay. Does in terms of some of the benefits beyond reduction in usage and bill impacts, would there be any benefits in terms of reduction in accounts receivable for the company?
I mean, generally, you would have to say, yeah, I can't quantify, but just in theory, that if I'm able to have any customer to reduce their consumption, reduce their bill amount, then in theory, everything else being the same, it would reduce receivables, charge-offs, and such. We don't track it that way, but just intuitively, that would happen.
Okay. And that would have been my next question. So you're saying that the company doesn't track that sort of information. Okay. If we can go now to going back to Mr. Chandler's line of question with respect to the categories of programs that were quote unquote in the pipeline, and the company's response to Commission's second data request, item 2-2.
Yes, sir.
You provided a chart of the various projects that were divided up. Can you refer to that response?
Yes, I have them. Thank you.
Okay. So if we go down, just for my own benefit as well, and for further clarification, the first set of the grouping, where below it says total incentives, new construction, 62,859, and these were all of the new construction program, all of the projects within the new construction program that have been waitlisted.
That is correct. So these programs were fully subscribed to what was budgeted for the year.
Okay.
And so these were above that amount.
Okay.
So $62,000 worth of incentives would be paid out, if approved. And the reason that they're on this wait list versus a pending Kentucky Power final list is the fact that the paperwork had not, 11 of them, the paperwork hadn't been completed. And we don't finish it and don't move it on until we get all the paperwork.
But I think
and then
later
one
on-
of them, it actually hadn't even finished the project.
didn't mean to cut you off, but I
That's
think in
okay.
your supplemental testimony that you said that all 12 of these projects had been moved on from the wait list to the Kentucky Power, pending Kentucky Power final approval. Is that correct? And let me double check here.
We talked about
If you look on, well, take that back. Look on page 15. Of your supplemental testimony.
yeah, I said they're eligible to be moved to the pending.
So 2 of the 12 are eligible.
Or
to
now
be
eligible, meaning that their paperwork has been submitted.
Okay.
All right. Now, we haven't moved them, just because of everything that's open within the case, but, they are eligibly moving from the waiting list to the pending Kentucky Power final approval. And that pending means that, we're giving the okay to say, pay that incentive.
Okay. Do you know if, looking at this list, West Perry Elementary, is that one of the construction programs that were eligible to be moved?
The 2 that are now complete is the, make sure the ties up. Yeah. The Viking Food Mart.
Okay.
And the Shell Key Equipment.
Okay.
Those are the 2 that have submitted in their final paperwork. But nothing's been paid out to them, but it's submitted.
Okay. But you're still waiting on the paperwork to be completed by West Perry Elementary. Is that correct?
Yes.
I guess, has there been any discussions, any follow-up discussions with any of these program participants in terms of what their intentions are going forward? Do they intend to complete those paperwork or and see where it goes going forward? Or
we have had communication with the contractor that administers these programs, and they have been in contact with these customers, stating, that you need to, if you have any chance of getting an incentive, you have to complete this paperwork and get it into us, because it is an open proceeding, and again, there's still no guarantees, and that's where we're at. I mean, there has been communication by the contractor.
Okay, but no feedback that you know of from each of the participants?
Well, I mean, they'll tell. I mean, I don't know them individually. I mean, yes, they feed me. I'm sure most of them are saying yes, but I mean, I don't have it by customer.
Okay, fair enough. And then moving down to the next set where it's pending Kentucky Power approval.
Yes.
Okay. And these are the ones that have submitted all of the paperwork and are just waiting on the outcome of this case. Is that correct?
Well, yes and no. I mean, when the commission issued its order, it stated to remove from our factor everything that was on the wait list.
Right.
And the evaluation.
Uh-huh.
All right. The $203,000 for these pending approvals, we left in the calculation.
Right.
So now the dollars haven't been given to the customer yet, I will say that. But in the factor that is currently in effect as of January 1st, 2018, we are assuming that we're going to pay that incentive to those customers of the $203,000.
Okay, so it would be this list and the last list of it's not numbered, but it starts with review status.
Yeah, the
Hazard
625, 676.
Right.
Yes.
So the
Those
first-
dollars also would still be in the factor.
Okay, so that would include the Hazard Independent Schools, Board of Education. That would, the very first one that was listed on that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, to your point, a lot of schools, as you can see through here, there is a lot of schools that are doing a lot of things in these programs, and so some are going to get paid based on, us following the direction of the order, but there's still some out there that's under that wait list that we've pulled out thus far.
Okay.
But both of them are under the same, they were both after it was fully subscribed. It's just some of them have, had their paperwork into us prior to, November when everything was shut down and such. So it's more about timing than anything else.
Okay. And then just the column where it says customer estimated percent complete. What does that mean?
Well, the contractor, so if we go back to that waiting list under new construction, so they're all 100% except for the Pikeville Medical Center.
Right.
And that's just an estimate that, that project, they're working on it still. There's $2,840 of incentives that could be paid out sometime, but they haven't finished their complete project yet. They're only 80% complete.
So the actual project implementation of whatever retrofit
measure is not
for the
complete.
new construction, whatever new construction is not completed.
That is correct,
Okay.
sir.
And then for the other three, it would be at whatever stages in the retrofit or the measures that are being implemented by each of those customers.
Yes.
Okay.
Because everything in the pending approval should be at 100%.
Okay. And then if you could just turn to page 15 of your supplemental testimony. 14, at the bottom 14 and at the top of 15. So this question involves the 71 of the 74 commercial incentive prescriptive custom program projects that are labeled as review status. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And then the answer says that the applications for these projects were submitted and approved prior to the program budget being fully committed. These projects were never on the wait list. These projects are still in progress or have been completed, and the final paperwork has not been received and verified. So the final paperwork, are there additional paperwork that's done after the construction or the retrofit has been completed?
Yes. So, they initially file an application that says, we're going to do X, whatever it might be. And the consultant looks at it, the contractor, and says, yep, that fits under this program for you to do that. And at that point in time, when they agree to that, if they do that, then we put aside so much incentive dollars that they would get paid out.
Okay.
And so those customers the 71 projects were projects, as we were before the budget was fully subscribed, for the program was fully subscribed. So, and it's, first in, first out type of program. So those would be paid. At the end of the project, the contractor goes back out to make sure that, before they pay them for what they said they were going to do, to inspect that they actually did install and follow what they had applied for. So yes, there is paperwork on the back end to verify that they've done exactly what they had proposed to do.
Okay. And then the Q&A section below that, where there are 86 commercial incentive prescriptive custom program projects and new construction projects on the wait list. I'll just focus on the commercial incentive prescriptive custom program projects. There are 74 of those programs that have been on the wait list, but has been moved to the pending Kentucky Power final approval
Well, again, they're eligible to move, just like there, it says 18 to 74, because of the way that, we laid it out and what the commission, directed for rehearing and such, we have not moved them, but they are eligible because they now have completed their paperwork.
Okay. So can you, of those 18, well, let me just double check here. Are any schools involved with those 18? So for instance,
Sure.
There's Johnson County Board of Education that have a lot of measures on the wait list.
All right, so Johnson County Board of Education, it's number 01674.
I'm sorry, 01674.
674. You look out to the left there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
They have, as a school,
Okay.
that's of the
Johnson County, that's the only
that's
one?
the only school of the 18.
Okay.
For instance, like Speedway has like 5 or 6 projects. Speedway LLC, they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 or 10 of their projects
Okay.
up now.
So all the others are still waiting on the final paperwork.
Yeah, different. For instance, I can tell you that the Johnson Board of Education, there's quite a few there. When I
Right.
mentioned the one,
Yeah.
there is 5 of those that are in final review. So in other words, they submitted some paperwork, and the contractor's now out there reviewing to make sure, so at some point in time they'll move to, they'll be ready.
Okay.
So to your question earlier, there is communication, there is follow-up. People are trying to get things completed.
Okay.
There, and I will say, in the past, especially when you come down towards the end of the year and you're pushing the customer to finish their projects, but for whatever reasons, we don't demand that they be done within 6 months, 3 months, 9 months. So, they're not going to get their payment till they do complete their project. So there are times when, they applied for and received money for a project in 2016 and doesn't get paid to 2017.
Okay. So for instance, if you take a look at, on the wait list for the customer prescriptive, the commercial prescriptive, if you look at the first Johnson County Board of Education, the 17-01451.
Yep.
That was $5,568. They've completed, so they've expended $5,568, and now they're just haven't submitted the final paperwork to receive, potentially
That's
receive.
right. Yeah, that's another one that's in final review. So they'll submit their paperwork, and then assuming the outcome of this case, that it gets approved to pay them, then we'd pay that incentive.
Okay. So there are some customers that have expended and waiting on the final paperwork.
Yes, there's quite that they've went, and as I said earlier, we notified each and every one of them that they were on the wait list, and that there wasn't a guarantee that we would go to the commission and try to get and work through the process, but they also were made aware that incentive wasn't a guarantee.
Okay. And I guess now switching back to you, you said that you weren't fully involved in the development of the calculation of the TRC ratio for the DSM programs?
Yeah, I don't do this.
Do you? So
those are done even, EJ, as over that, he runs the programs. But he uses the consultant AEG to help them with that. I mean, that's things that are done at that consultant level. We don't have people within Kentucky Power that are making those calculations. He will review them. He'll go over it with the consultant, but we are not the ones making that calculation.
Okay. Were you here earlier with the discussion with Mr. Gravitt in terms of Kentucky Power's current situation of having, I would call it significant excess capacity? Were you there for that Q&A?
I wouldn't call it significant excess capacity, but yes, we have excess capacity.
Okay. And you had mentioned in response to Sierra Club's council, response to commission staffs, I guess it was the data requests that were accompanied with the initiating order in this case, requesting confirmation of Kentucky Power's peak, all-time system peak.
Yes.
System peak in 2016, as well as Kentucky Power's, I guess what
December, the winter peaker, yes.
Right, and what the capacity situation is with respect to meeting the peak.
Yes, I was here for that.
And that was done for 2016, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Because the initiating order wasn't issued in February of 17, right?
Right. We can. And I can tell you that, just to give you a reference for what we filed at PJM, which we have to file each year for the 2017/18 period, based on the forecasts and such, we're predicted to be a 25% reserve margin. And just to put that in perspective, PJM based under FRR is roughly 16.5% reserve margin. Okay. So it's roughly 10% above that, as forecasted based on the loads.
So you all submit that with respect to your FRR plan?
Yes.
Okay. Does PJM calculate Kentucky Power's obligation, load obligation within PJM, as well as its capacity situation, the ability for Kentucky Power to meet its load obligation within PJM? Does PJM do that on its own?
Okay, can you read? I'm sorry, I lost you there.
So the companies submit your load and capacity for 2017.
Yeah, we submit into there what we're available to produce.
Okay.
And and the reserve margin is calculated, by PJM, and so as long as we have committed into PJM above that.
Okay. So does PJM utilize that information to arrive at the load obligation for Kentucky Power and its ability to meet that load capacity?
Yes.
Okay. If I can approach, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
This is the direct testimony of Lane Collin filed in Kentucky Power's pending rate case, 2017-179. I've got an excerpt. I'll pass out the excerpt to the parties, and there's the full testimony that I'll provide to you. So, you have the excerpt. It's pages 9 and 10 of Mr. Collins' testimony, as well as his Exhibit 5, which is footnoted in his testimony on those 2 pages. if you can just take a little bit of time and read at the bottom of page, well, let me ask you this. The bottom of page 9, beginning with line 18, and going to page 10, ending at line 7, Mr. Collin describes Kentucky Power's capacity situation going forward from the planning year 2017, from the PGM planning year 2017-18 through 2021-2022. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the table on page 10 provides a summary of Kentucky Power's projected reserve margins with and without the Rockport 2 capacity agreement. Is that correct?
Could you say that again, please? I'm sorry.
So the table on page 10, it shows for the planning years 2017-28, PGM planning years 2017-2018 through 21-2022, Kentucky Power's projected reserve margins with the Rockport 2 units and without the Rockport 2 units.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And that table is basically a summary of the response by Kentucky Power to KIUC's first set of data requests, item number 5, which is the exhibit that was attached to his testimony, and that's included in this little excerpt. Is that correct?
It is.
Okay. You had a chance to review that in the rate case?
Yes, I'm aware of it.
Okay. Okay. It shows that for the planning years, PGM planning year 2017-2018, that Kentucky Power had reserve margin of 33.58%. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then gradually increasing, there's a slight dip in 2019-2020, but ultimately increasing to the PGM planning year 2021-2022 of 48.06%. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then if you mentioned earlier that the PGM installed reserve margin was 16.6%, and that's included in this table as well. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So the next column on the right of that shows, quantifies the excess capacity for Kentucky Power with the Rockport 2 capacity up to 2022.
Yes.
Okay, and that's beginning in 2017-2018, it's 163 megawatts, and then ultimately in 2021-2022, it's 281 megawatts. Is that correct?
221.
I'm sorry, 281.
Okay,
If
yes.
I said
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
So would you, so you wouldn't characterize a reserve margin of 33.58%, which is roughly a little under 17% over what PJM requires, is not significant?
It's a lot. You know, it's what your termination of significant. Clearly, it's well above it.
Okay.
And, you know, I would say that, you know, so I don't know that at this point in time that we can fill much of that in the 17, 18, 18, 19 timeframe. But in the 19/20 timeframe, when the excess is 201, you know, we've already got a commitment for 80 of that. And this just talking about two customers, Brady and Interblue. So, we're making the efforts. It's clearly there. The numbers are the numbers, but we're making the efforts to reduce that significantly, if not totally.
You don't have any reasons to say that this information is inaccurate?
No.
Okay.
Mr. Wayne, can I interject
Sure.
for 1 second? So you've just gone through the capacity, excess margin numbers, and it's been established that there's obviously a great amount of unused capacity forecast, even in excess of what PJM commitments are, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then you said that there's 80 megawatts that are committed to the future that will consume part of this capacity. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So when Kentucky Power came in for their rate case, they didn't anticipate any of that capacity coming on, in particular the aluminum plant, and that wouldn't have already been forecast in here?
The rate case was a historic test year.
Right.
And
But you're forecasting for the future. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
That's
the
okay.
table forecasts into the future.
This table here.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's, in this here, we did, okay, I'm sorry. In this table, and I don't know when this data, the table that we use, but the data we did not have Brady nor Interblue known at all at the time this table was developed.
All right. thank you.
I see your point, but no,
I
we
just
did
wanted
not.
to confirm.
No, I understood, but no, we did not have that for this. We brought, when the question was asked, we used, and Lane Collin used this data, that information was not known.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No. That's a good point. So, given just your general knowledge and understanding of the calculation of the total resource cost benefit analysis, that includes avoided cost as a component in that calculation. Given that Kentucky Power does not face a need to build generation anytime in the intermediate future, how would you think that would impact that the cost benefit calculation?
I'm going to follow the answer that Mr. Grevitt answered. In general, that should reduce, because of where we're at, I would think, to what amount and such. I am not an expert at all to know any further, but as a general thought, if you're looking at, what your TRC value is above 1, it would probably reduce it some. But to what amount, I have no idea.
Sure, fair enough. Can you refer back now to Mr. Gravitt's direct testimony? And it is on page 6 of his direct testimony. At the very top of the page, lines 2 to 4.
Yes, sir.
Where he states that the company's DSM portfolio has a total resource cost benefit ratio of 1.24 in 2016, rising to 1.72 in 2025. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay. And the footnote refers to the company's response to Sierra Club's first set of data requests, item number 8, Exhibit 6, in Kentucky Power Company Demand Side Management Program Plan, case number 2015-00271, dated August 10th, 2015. So, the information that is relied upon by Mr. Gravitt is the company's calculation of the TRC that was done back in 2015. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Has Kentucky Power calculated the specifically the total resource costs, cost-benefit ratio for its DSM programs since the response that was provided back in 2015?
No, that is the purpose that we're saying to keep the AEG evaluation project. What they will do is, as I said earlier, in 15, for any existing programs that we were going to continue, there was a TRC and there was something that we had actual data on. If we implemented some new programs, and we did a couple of new programs 3 years ago, or 2 years ago now, that would have been estimated. They're based on, they would have helped us to come up that it was cost effective, and we submitted that, some numbers for the commission to approve, and they approved. The evaluation that we're asking to be paid for and for us to continue on will then tell us, for the programs that have been in existence, last 2 years, but it'll be 3 years times it's finished, whether they still are cost effective. The chances are they're going to be different than what was 3 years ago, but up, down, but we don't know without that evaluation. So we have not. That's why we've always contracted out for the evaluation to be done by a independent party to say this is. And then what they would also then do is, if that we moved on to creating a 2019 portfolio, they would help us based on that look at new programs and determine, based on information and such, what the TRC is for those. But it would be estimated because the program's not in effect. 3 years later, then we would see how well it did to that. So to your direct answer, no, we have not done anything, we being Kentucky Power. That's part of the evaluation process.
Okay. So back in 2015, Kentucky Power did not do that TRC calculation, correct?
Well, it was on the existing programs that were continuing. Yes, there was done, not by us, but by the consultant.
Right.
They were done.
Okay. So was that done by AEG?
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
Okay. Were you here when I asked Mr. Gravitt regarding the increase in 2016 with respect to the lost revenue, the spike in the revenue that occurred in 2016?
Yes.
And he mentioned that based on his review of the record and the data, that he couldn't come up with a clear sense as to what caused it. Does the company know what caused that spike?
Yes, generally, got to remember what happened since the Mitchell settlement in the case is that, we were at a $3 million level, and then we agreed in $1 million increments to get up to $6 million, and then to continue for 2 more years through 2018 at roughly that amount before you could change, or we could come back and ask for more or less. So this, and we've had success. We've had success in our DSM programs, especially the commercial programs. When I had to go to Mr. Clayton back in the Mitchell case and say, look, we're discussing the settlement, and part of what's on the table is to go from $3 to $6 million. Can we do that? And Mr. Clayton said, well, it's going to be tough. We're going to have to get some new programs, but we should be able to manage that. And he and his team have done a good job of that and been very successful in not just spending for the idea, well, we got to spend. All right, that's not what we did. We've developed cost-effective programs and made sure they were cost-effective programs, monitored the programs, and advertise them and, to achieve these records and to continue. And so inevitably, as, if I get more participation and if within some of those, my estimates of, in some of the programs, the incentives and such that incur depend on how much they're going to invest capital in a particular program and such, so when we've had more success recently, it was the main driver for the increase, to lost revenues or recovery of the revenues. So that's it in general.
Okay, so bottom line, it was increased participation. Okay. Those are all the questions I have, Your Honor. And can I move?
Commissioner Cicero, questions?
Can I request to introduce, move to have Commission's Exhibit 1 enter into
Any objection?
No objection.
Let it be admitted as Commission Exhibit 1. Commissioner Cicero?
I'd like to follow up on some of the staff questions. And also a question that was asked by council regarding, well, it wasn't really a question, maybe a statement. It talks about the increased load due to the 2 new projects. And I'm curious, is the company stating that the DSM program should be viewed in the light that there's new load coming on, that we should be looking at these DSM programs in a different light because of the additional capacity coming on, or what's the position? Help me.
That's a fair question. What we're trying to, as this case has evolved, is we realize, and some of the things have been stated, that we are in excess capacity position at this time. And again, by bringing up Brady, Interblue, and those, what we're trying to state is that there's benefits beyond just capacity and such, but we're eating into that margin. So part of the concern is, I've got all this excess capacity. Do I need to really have customers involved in conserving energy? And I think generally the answer is still that yes. But what our concern is that, so if we continue to have successes, and we've got, as I said, some other things in the pipeline that hopefully come through, but as we eat into that capacity deficit or excess at this point in time, that we don't want to stop. If the Commission's order after this evaluation is that we're only going to keep the targeted energy as the only program, shut everything down, I mean, we can do that, all right, and we'll switch what EJ and his team does into other openings and such. But if then down, in 20 or 21, when that load is available now, and let's say it's really good and that margin's getting narrow, for us to start back up a DSM program, it's just not going to happen overnight, because we will have moved DJ and his team to doing other things and such. So we're just painting a picture as we think and as the Commission thinks on how we want to evolve, what do we want done with DSM. We're just trying to present all the information, to help you make a decision. We'd like to see the DSM programs move forward. We would like to work with all parties to say what the portfolio should be. And as we see it and what we're hearing a lot, that it needs to be probably more towards the commercial, but yet under the residential, be more targeted, whatever it is, but we don't want to move into during 2018, because one thing initially Alfred was that we're going to put together for 2019 a portfolio. But if it's the Commission's desire to stop DSM for now, that's fine. We won't go through that process, but just realize to start it up somewhere down the road, it's just not something you start up overnight, I guess is what we're trying to say, just to be aware.
So currently the agreed amount is $6 million through 18, and then by commission approval, 19 going forward, whatever it's continues at $6 million. That's the cost of the program, and the revenue associated with it is $4 million, making it approximately $10 million. And I know that I heard Mr. Gravitz talk about revenue being collected one way or the other, but associating the total cost of, including revenue losses, a cost is $10 million.
Yeah, if it's just $4 million, yeah, I mean, just using your numbers, that would be 10.
So $10 million, and I'm going to ignore the other side of the argument here about whether it's collected or not. And we're just heading into 2018. So I got 18, 19. When is your first project come on, the Brady project?
We've been saying 2020. I think the earliest would be the fourth quarter of 19, but 2020.
2020, 18, 19.
And that's both of those projects. The Brady and the Interblue are right now projected early 2020.
Essentially, we're talking about $20 to $30 million associated with DSM, of which I realize that we're not cutting it all out, so that there's some spend in there. But would the company really suggest that the commission, at this point, just say spend that money, and because we want you to be ready to go full bore because of anticipated and projected consumption that still doesn't even reduce the operating margin to a level that comes close to what PJM's requirement is?
Not at all. No, sir. I don't want to come across that way at all. What we're saying is we, help, to what level, as you said earlier, the 2, 4, 6, 8, whatever million, whatever was not, it was just a number that was negotiated to some level. But there are benefits, and we see the benefits to the customers in helping them with, back to the public comment this morning, where that grocery store owner and what they could do. We see there is. Does it need to be at the $6 million level? Sir, we're not saying that at all. I think we need to see what is the proper level of expenses, what seems to make sense, and with the guidance, we'll develop a portfolio that says, hey, we want to work towards whatever seems to be the appropriate level. I wish I could sit here and just tell you, I think that appropriate level is X. I'm not that smart. It's still a basis of what's out there, what's acceptable. We truly do understand the impact on the low income and what we can do to target that, or what we can put together. So I think it's, again, we're looking for guidance of where we want to move towards. We are not saying that it needs to be at $6 million for the next 3 years until they come in.
And I hope you would agree that the commission, in 2 or 3 years, if we go one way in this case, and said in 2 or 3 years it's necessary for DSM, this is a fluctuating situation here. Just like when you were required to implement a $6 million program, variables, conditions change, but you hope that the commission is flexible enough to realize that, and I'm not saying we're going to go either way, I'm just saying based on circumstances is how the commission should be addressing the issues at hand. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that 100%, sir. That's right. And we're just, we're looking for the guidance, a little bit from the commission as, where you see things where, so that, again, the last thing we want to do is put together something, we have people working, during 2018 to present something for 2019 that is in no way what you as a commission see happening over the next couple of years. So, it is a partnership. I guess to use my president's term he uses a lot, so that we're all in agreement as to what we're working towards, and then whatever's agreed upon then, is recovered. So it's very accurate.
Okay. So let me go to a different line of questioning here. You said 2015 was the last time the TRC was done.
Yeah, as we got ready for these programs started in 16, so it would have been at the end of 15. That's someone asked about cycles or something earlier. We've kind of tried to stay on that 3-year cycle. You start, so you have a first year, and then the consultant starts evaluating, how, has the first year, and then after the second year, they really get deep into how well is it doing, and by the end of the third year, they come up with, they redo all those numbers based on the actuals, so it's kind of a 3-year cycle.
So at this point, it's been evaluated in 2015, and I know one of the proposals is to spend $287,000 or approximately thereabout for this consultant's evaluation to see whether all the programs still provide a benefit. Is that?
That's correct, sir.
You mentioned, maybe Ms. Tabor mentioned the fact that the new rate, DSM rate, was going to be $1.28, and that represented an 88% decline from the current. Is $1.28 sound correct?
That's what was initially proposed when we had the option A and option B. Since that time, it's actually, for the residential, it's actually a credit.
Well,
and so it's even greater.
We understand the credit is associated with two major mistakes made by Kentucky Power in their calculation, okay? I mean, in the first year of calculating, they underestimated the amount that they needed to when they came up with the rate for 2017, and then 2017 they actually over-collected. So as a result, in 2018, there's going to be a credit. Would you agree with that?
I would not call it, I would respectfully say it was a mistake. It's the way the numbers worked out. Okay, I mean, the numbers weren't in error. It's just, what do you want to include and exclude out of the numbers?
Well, I don't want to debate the point, but I can say that Kentucky Power developed the rate, and when you overcollect by the amount they did in 2017, I would consider that a miscalculation. How's that?
I guess I would respectfully still disagree, sir.
That's okay. I mean, we can disagree, but that's the reason.
But a large part of it was due to the under recovery. That is fact.
And that is basically why there's a credit.
Now, because we've eliminated that. That is correct. We've eliminated the under collection. Yes.
Okay. So I want to understand a little bit more about the definition of what paperwork is. It's been used interchangeably at the beginning of the process, the end of the process, whether it's been approved, not approved. So when we talk about those that have applied to participate in this program, sorry, I'm supposed to take medicine now. And who's participating in this program? Are we saying that there's paperwork submitted for projects that the company hasn't seen nor approved that are on your list for funding?
I don't think so. Well, I mean, so there's 2 times there's paperwork.
Okay.
At the beginning. So you fill out an application, just like you go in, and in the application there's questions. So I got a new construction project. I want to fall under the new construction program. I would fill out an application that describes what I plan to do. That application is submitted to the consultant, the contractor who's running that program, and they would review that paperwork at that point in time to say, all right, what you're saying does or does not fit what falls under this program. There are people that fill out and say, hey, I'm going to install washing machines somewhere, and we say, all right, that has nothing to do with new construction. No, that doesn't fit. But you have someone that comes in and says, hey, we're going to put in freezers to reduce, consumption, in my grocery store. And we'd say, that fits this program, you can proceed. So now that customer goes off to do what they said they were going to do in their application. At the end, they then come back in, all right, and provide what they did. They said this is what they were going to do. They then say this is what we did do. The contractor takes that, goes out, and looks at and says, yes, you did do this. And then at that point in time, then it goes to get approval for the incentive to be paid out. So there's, at the front end and the back end, paperwork that's happening, sir.
So when does Kentucky Power give its initial approval? At what point in that process that you just described does Kentucky Power say, you're eligible, go spend the money?
At the beginning, all right, we would say, so for 2017, as applications come in, we would say, when the contractor said this is approved, then they had the authorization, because they knew the budget amount, to say, Kentucky Power approves that to be paid. When this happened where we had to stop at the expense level for the program, what we then told the customer is that, we can't guarantee the payment of this incentive because we've been told to limit to this program. All right, we will seek to try to get that, but you are realizing that there's no guarantee. And then they chose whether or not to proceed.
So, you've got a program. Somebody the contractor out there helps people decide, promotes the program. Those people come in, they make a determination of whether they believe it's eligible or not. They bring it to Kentucky Power. Kentucky Power says, yes, that would have been eligible under the old scenario, but right now we've got a stopgap order that says, don't spend any money. So right now you're in limbo. You can spend money if you want to, but we can't tell you that we're going to reimburse you.
That's what they were told, sir.
Did the contractor understand when he was still soliciting for those projects that there was a order in place that said your spending has been limited, don't go out and solicit?
Yeah, it's a good point. We told them that, look, here's our limit, and so they did stop soliciting. But there was quite a bit that was still in the pipeline of people submitting applications and such. So to your point, yes, they did notify, and from a standpoint of, you're right, they're out there trying to get more and more customers, they stopped.
Okay. You made a comment that you believe that a lot of these applications were continued forward in the process, these projects, let me get it right. These projects that came in before Kentucky Power, and you said, wait a minute, there's not enough money for it, but these customers decided on their own that they would go forward with it because past history, Kentucky Power told them in the past they would try to find funding for it from the commission, and usually it happened, and it was because they were repeat customers. Who do you have besides the schools that are repeat customers?
A lot of grocery stores, the Speedway, as different organizations. A lot of, again, it's small, the school boards, a lot of the Speedway did a lot of grocery store type of applications. A lot of auto parts, Advance was doing a lot. There was quite a bit with churches, and the churches talk to each other, in areas. So in general, those were probably the biggest groupings. And then there's just, as people know and hear from other customers.
So when you refer to...
And a lot of them, and I'm sorry to interrupt there a minute, a lot of them, do one project one year and then say, wow, that was very successful, and they'll do another project. Maybe they don't have the capital to do a multitude of projects, so they do them over years.
So when you refer to somebody like Speedway or grocery store chains, some of those are national companies that are taking advantage of the program. In other words, other ratepayers in their class are helping could be a multinational corporation fund their little projects because they know they can do it.
Generally, yes, but a lot of those Speedways are franchise owned, through the franchise name. But I think most of these probably are franchise, but it could be some of the others. I don't know for sure.
One last question.
Sure.
I'm going to kind of do it in a scenario here.
Okay.
So if somebody told you a stock was really good, and you went out and invested in it, and you lost money, would you go back to the person that told you lost money in the stock market, that you lost money and please give me my money back?
I would not go back and tell you my money back because I know what the answer would be. But, that maybe that was the first time it wasn't successful. So, to your scenario, I mean, it's possible I'd go back if I had a good track record with that person in the past, you know, and it was a very successful record, and we happened to lose the one time. And, you know, and I'm going to play on your scenario a little bit. You know, I hope our customers of Kentucky Power feel like that, you know, we're there working and trying to work with them. And, you know, when we've got that type of relationship that, you know, that we're working to do things together. And so I think that relationship is part of the reasons you see some of the customers that have went ahead and taken the risk of doing the project, not guaranteed to pay out.
So I'm going to take it one step further.
Okay.
So do you not think that it was the responsibility of Kentucky Power to make certain that they realized that it was an order issued by the commission that said that there was no more funding available for this, and perhaps you should put a hold on your order until the commission issued something different than what you currently had?
That was done, sir. Through the consultant, that was done. And then they would have chosen whether to continue or to stop.
I'm back to the stock market, Kim. People that spend money in light of the evidence take a risk.
And there's no doubt about that in this at all. They realized there was a risk.
And I believe that the commission is fully aware that obligations that were made before the order was issued are those obligations that Kentucky Power should follow through on. But the commitments that people thought they had without having a basis probably don't have much of a grounds. That's all I have.
Commissioner Matthews?
Okay. First, I'd like to address the comment about on-bill financing. And my thoughts there, my line of questioning was, are there non-utility programs such as on-bill financing? In my head, when I was speaking of that, I was meaning a third party that would finance those and then would work with the utility to compute those savings and so forth. I believe we have one of those operating in Eastern Kentucky, so that's what I was thinking. Do you have a collaborative for your DSM programs?
We do.
Are commercial customers part of that collaborative?
They are.
And in that collaborative, did you have these conversations following up on what the vice chairman said about, ceasing shopping?
Yes. We conducted a collaborative meeting within the last month. I don't remember the date, that we gave them an update. I was on the call. We gave them an update on the case, where it stood, what the issues were. And, the collaborative members is, as select of residential and commercial to help us to work through issues and such. And, how, they understood, did they go out and pass that on to others? I don't know. But they were informed of exactly what we just discussed.
Who are your contractors that the vice chairman or perhaps staff ask, at what point does Kentucky Power approve these projects? And I believe I heard you say the contractor approves these projects.
Well, the contractor knows their limitations. So in other words, EJ has two other individuals. It's a three-person team that does DSM. And they're in contact, and they split up the programs. And those who they deal with, those particular contracts, know what their limitations are. All right, so in other words, we don't want to slow down the process. Every time someone comes in, they have to pick up the phone and call EJ or one of his, say, well, can we approve this one? Can we approve this one? They know their limitations. And so, we've said, here's the money, here's the whatever. Because in the past, all right, before this year, if something was fully, they had hit their limit on what the budget, what they were budgeted to spend, at that point, they would come back to EJ and his team and say, we need approval to spend further.
Did they do that this time?
No, because
they're
not spending, they're not, but they weren't, again, we notified those that, that to spend would be the incentives that we're going to pay out, and they were told that the money, based on the commission order, is not there. And we said, we would try to get it, but we didn't give them any promises that, I feel they should be paid, all right, because these were all in the pipeline at some point in time during the year, leading up to November. But, the commission will make its decision, and we were very clear with everyone what that was.
Do the contractors that approve the projects then do the projects for the customer?
No, they run the programs. No, so they're not, I approve your project, then I go out and build your thing. No.
We've talked a little bit about the over and under recovery situation that created some valleys and some mountains. If you have fewer programs to run and you have a different, in your testimony you said there was going to be a different methodology for computing. Can you give the commission some confidence that those over and under recovery situations will diminish?
Yes, I think the biggest reason for an over/under or recover was in the methodology that we used, which went back clear to 1995 or 96, and was in the Schedule C that's filed. You have, if you recall, you have a ceiling, a floor, and a midpoint. The floor was calculated that we basically just paid for incentives and lost revenue. The ceiling was paid for everything, and the factor was at the midpoint. Now, I wish I could sit here today and tell you why that calculation was developed that way, and we've looked and I can't. All right, but it was. So inherent in that is that if I pick a midpoint, and when you look at, and I guess this is partly, why I respectfully disagree with Commissioner Cicero, but you pick that midpoint and then you have increase in cost, and if decrease in sales, your estimates, you've got this perfect storm of having this large under recovery. Should we have recognized it was coming sooner? Possibly. In hindsight, looking at it, there were probably some things out there we probably should have seen earlier and didn't. But what we do now is we don't, everything's at the ceiling, everything's at the all-in. So the only thing that can honestly change whether you over and under recovery under the new method is, what's your estimated program cost or kilowatt hour sales used to make your calculations. And so there's a lot less variability in those. So, that should be the confidence that the roller coaster as you use would be much smaller.
Okay. You said earlier that you didn't know whether the level of spending should be $6 million or what, but I think in your testimony you urged the commission to go ahead and approve the $6 million for this year.
As part, and the reason for that was as part of this settlement, that was the level that was agreed through to 2018. Okay, and so that's why it's stated that way. And then that's why then also stated for 19, as part of that settlement, the number could change based on, the circumstances. And, clearly I think the circumstances have changed since 2000 and the Mitchell settlement case, and we should look at it.
You said you have 3 individuals working on DSM programs?
Currently, yes.
And they've been working on these programs for some period of time?
Yes. I mean, EJ's a lifer. The other one gentleman was hired in the last 3 years, and then the other one has been doing different stages, probably 7 or 8 years.
There are fewer programs for them to administer. Do they have the skill set to do the evaluation of the programs?
No.
Can you train them?
Maybe. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I don't know what the consultant does. So could they? I guess it's possible, but I wouldn't know. I will tell you, there was a time and period where the AP Service Corporation had a group that did some of the evaluations. And this goes back probably 10 or so years ago. And then that group was disbanded, in my terminology, but, was eliminated. And from that point on, the expertise of that, was not at the company level, or did we bring anyone? So that's why we went to the consultants.
I write notes and it's kind of stream of consciousness, so forgive me for a second. We have the spreadsheet with the waiting, pending, lots of different terminologies, and a total sum of 1.5,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
believe. How much of that 1.5 was included, and I know it's in the record somewhere, but I want to hear it. How much of that 1.5 was included in the DSM rates that went into effect January 1?
You'll give me a second?
I'm glad to know you don't have it at the tip of your tongue because it's
No?
a very complicated table.
You'll give me a second, I'll use my calculator, I'll take it. Of that 1,519,000, 924,099 was included. Now,
And that leaves a gap of, don't make me do math in my head.
I will tell you that too. I didn't have it. Roughly 595,421. Now, when we made those changes, that was those numbers in the factor when we pulled out that 595,000. We also pulled out associated lost revenues and incentives. So it was actually more than the 595. But in what we provided here, that was in tying to those numbers.
And of the school systems that provided a letter to the commission yesterday, which category do they fall into? The already accounted
For that letter, it was strictly geared towards the wait list.
Which was included or was not included?
Was not. It would be part of that 595,421 that was not included.
But certain parts of that, of those programs or projects, some of those projects have already begun and some of them are 100% complete.
Yes.
I just wonder how adamant those contractors were when they said, don't start these projects. We have no guarantee of your getting paid for them.
I don't know.
That's all I have.
Well, I don't know if you know anything about schools or school law, but school districts are required to get approval from the Kentucky Department of Education, their architects, and enter into contracts, any of which are required to be bid. So once they're involved, they can't stop whether the incentive is there or not there. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. I mean, I'm not intimate in that, but
you could breach your contract and not go forward, but otherwise that would, assuming what I'm saying is correct.
Yeah, and that's my understanding. I don't know. I hear what you're saying. I don't know if these programs fit under that same scenario, small, big. I'm not close to it every day. I don't know, sir.
But it's a loss of quite a bit of money to the school districts if they aren't reimbursed. Is that correct?
That is
correct. I
sir.
assume that knowing and working for some time with Kentucky Power the districts came to know that if they, when they bid projects or when they budgeted for projects, when these schools that had energy managers would basically work into their figures the rebates, because they would know what the rebates were. Is that correct?
That's a fair assessment, sir.
No further questions. Ms. Talbot.
Very brief, Your Honor. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm
sorry.
I've overlooked Mr. Overbrook. Mr. Overbrook.
Along with it,
I just have a couple of questions, and I think when Mr. Gravatt was on the stand, Commissioner Matthews asked a question about when the IRP that was filed in December 2016, the data that was in that, it was current as of what date? And of course, he didn't know. Do you know the answer to that question?
Yeah, most of that data, that was, that IRP was put together the second half of 2016. It was filed in December of 2016. Of course, it looks forward 10 years to laying out data, or 15 years laying out data. So, but that was put together with information and data that we understood during the second half of 2016.
Okay. And then in your rebuttal testimony, you kind of lay out the various procedural steps in this proceeding. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And the various filings the company made, and then the responses the company received from the commission.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the first order, after the order initiating the case, the company received from the commission was the May 4th order. Is that consistent with your understanding?
That would be correct.
Okay. In relation to the date of that order, when did Kentucky Power notify its contractors to inform applicants of what was going on?
Immediately. Within the next 2 days. We're in contact. Some of the programs, again, what we told them at that time is, so I'll give you a couple examples. So the commercial, so I think we got 7 or 8 programs, I forget. But one of those programs was already, because what we told them was, all right, you were budgeted X amount in these programs. Our understanding of the May 4th order is you can't go above that number. There was one program that had already exceeded it. We was doing so well. But when we stopped it, though, said, all right, put stop on it, no more, don't be soliciting it. The others were told, all right, you can only spend up to that. After that, there's people still in the pipeline. We have to inform them that it's full, that the incentive's not there. Not sure we can pay it, but you have, it's your discretion. So they were notified immediately. The contractors were.
Okay. And Mr. Wynn and you had a discussion about the company's response to staff. I think it was 2-2. That's the spreadsheet with all the projects in the 4 different categories. Do you remember that?
I do.
And you spoke specifically about a Johnson County project, and then the value beside it was $5,568.
I remember, yes.
Okay. So, and I'll admit that my hearing has gone the way of my hairline, so I may have misunderstood, but just so the record is clear, that $5,568, is that the total investment by the Johnson County schools in that project, or is that the incentive that the...
That's the incentive that they would be paid if approved.
And does that program provide for 100% repayment? Is the incentive under that program equal to 100% of the cost?
No.
So the Johnson County, even with the payment of the incentive, has an
Right,
investment.
they still have an investment. They're measuring, the cost-benefit analysis. Many times what they're looking at is, what their payback period is. And so that's part of their decision to invest whatever the capital outlay is, and that's part of what they're looking at. The contractor works with them is that, if you spend X, this is the incentive, here's your estimated kilowatt-hour savings, what's your payback period? Those are discussions that they have.
And then I think you had a conversation with Mr. Nguyen about the impact analysis that the company is proposing to go forward with and then recover the cost associated with that.
Yes.
Has that analysis, at the time the company received the order telling the company not to proceed with that analysis, had there been expenditures made in connection with that?
Yeah, there had been roughly $4,000. We'd started them back up, and then when that order came out that said, that we can't recover those costs, we immediately called them, stopped it again,
Okay,
and they're on hold.
I'm sorry, I may have misled you. If you'll look at, and I apologize, your supplemental testimony at page 7. Line 7, what is the amount that the Kentucky Power had paid AEG for the work done prior to the order from the commission?
$125,000, and those dollars are in the current factor.
Okay, and then what is the amount, if the commission were to authorize the company to proceed to complete the analysis and obtain the cost-effectiveness information, what is the remaining cost, estimated cost?
On page 8 of my testimony, to complete the impact evaluation would be $165,000, and then to do the consulting to help us develop the new programs, if we were to proceed in 19, would be $62,000 for a total of $227,000.
Okay, and that 165 is in addition to the 120.
Is in addition,
okay.
And it is not currently in the factor effective January 1st, 2018.
Okay. I have long been warned against doing attorney math, but I need to ask you about your calculation that you performed for Commissioner Matthews. Okay?
Okay.
And so you came up with $924,000?
Whatever the number I came up with, I'd have to redo it.
Okay, well, let's do it this way. If you go to page 17 of your supplemental testimony. And I understand there's only one thing harder than attorney math is doing math on the stand as a witness. You indicate there that the amounts of the incentives that are included in the current factor are $203,400 and $625,700. Do you see that?
Yes.
Could you add those two numbers together, please?
That's 829,074.
Okay.
But the difference is, was I was adding everything that came to the $1.5 million. And the reason there's a difference is those are strictly talking about only the wait list and the pending approval. Also in here is that's the difference between the 829 and the 9 number that I
Okay, I
quoted.
just wanted to make sure that difference was clear in the record.
Yes, I understand. Yeah, there was $95,000 of administration expense and stuff but I was in my supplemental testimony was talking strictly around those two waitlist programs.
Okay, all right. You've been asked about approvals, and I think the term is I just want to make sure the record's clear as to what you understand that term to mean. So when a commercial customer seeking an incentive for a new construction project submits the application, is there an approval given in connection with that application?
There is an approval that says this project meets what can be done under that program.
Okay.
Call it something else, but they're signing off on that.
And that approval doesn't result in any monies being paid out of DSM funds, is that correct?
No monies are paid at that time, no.
At that time. And then there's a second approval. And what has to happen prior to that second approval occurring?
Basically, the project has to be completed, and then someone has to go out and verify that, and with all the paperwork, that it is completed as was submitted and proposed.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Tauber?
Just a couple of questions. I can say good afternoon now.
Yes, you can.
You were asked some questions about the benefits of efficiency in future years based on the relative capacity position of the company. Do you recall those?
I do.
And I just want to clarify, you would agree, though, wouldn't you, that a cost-effective DSM has benefits to customers today?
Yes.
You were also, my last question, you were asked from Commissioner Matthews whether the new, the modified DSM rate methodology that the company has now adopted, plus a change in the DSM portfolio, would give the Commission confidence in mitigating the magnitude of over and under recoveries. Do you recall that?
I do.
I just want to confirm that, would you agree that that confidence in reduced over and under recoveries based on the new revised DSM rate methodology would also occur if the suspension were lifted and there were the former DSM?
That would be true. The whole idea is however it's used, whatever the level, yes.
That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just one question, please, Chairman. And bear with me because I forgot to bring my charger, so I no longer have a computer to refer to. But do you have the attachment to company response to staff 2.2, the Excel in front of you?
I do.
I believe the very first entry in that Excel is an elementary school. Is that correct?
West Perry Elementary School.
And there's an identifying number to the left of that, correct?
Yes, a project number, yes.
And when are those project numbers assigned?
I don't know for sure. I honestly, in the details, I don't know when that project number is assigned.
Would you agree that that project number, that all of the project numbers on that page, or at least on the first part, are all begin with either 16 or 17?
Yes.
And would you agree that at least the one for the elementary school that you mentioned starts in 16?
Yes. I mean, it could have been something, and I mentioned this earlier, that they could have late in the year said of 16 said, I want to do this project. So it gets, and I think the project number is assigned at the time the contractor, approves that it's a valid contract. But then, it may take 3 or 4 months to finish it or whatever. So we do have some that roll over. So this would have been one that started in late 16 probably.
So it could have been possible that, at least especially in regards to that first one that begins with an identifying number of 16, but at least more of those that begin with 17, that they would have come to Kentucky Power the first time well in advance of either a May order or a November order, asking the company to clarify whether their project would be approved for an incentive.
Okay. Let me back up because I think I've misspoke a little. All right. Because again, I guess I'm going to have to maybe do a post-hearing data request on this because I don't want to miss, because this customer, take the West Perry Elementary School, based on the way I've described everything, they would not, they would not been approved to say that, because of the funding. And so if they would have been a 16, you would have thought that that would have been done. So I need to understand when the project number is assigned to properly answer that question. And I apologize. I need to look that up.
And so in a post-hearing data request, and can I provide this after the fact, but I think it would help clarify the record, and I assume you would feel more comfortable with this. As a post-hearing data request, can you provide the process that that you were just referring to as to when the number is provided? And maybe for clarifying purposes, could you also provide the date in which, of those identifying numbers and projects that were provided, the date in which those ID numbers were assigned?
I will try. I assume there's a date. I don't know, but if there is, we will definitely provide it.
Or at least the date in which they first came to the company with that application.
I'm sure there's some date somewhere, and it's probably in the records of the contractor, but yes, I'll try to get all that information.
Thank you. That's all I have, Chairman.
No questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Nguyen, questions?
No questions, Your Honor.
Commissioner Cicero?
Just one last question. Since there was no targeted programs identified in the $6 million agreement settlement, how did Kentucky Power determine that the $6 million program cost was not inclusive of the revenue? In other words, a $6 million program that was $6 million of program costs and $6 million or some portion of the $6 million that was the revenue requirement associated with the program. How did the $6 million become a total spend?
That was the discussions during the settlement.
There was a discussion in the settlement?
Yeah, those were program costs. Yeah. That's simple. I'm sorry. Yeah, there's nothing beyond that. Those would be the program costs, not inclusive of the revenues and the incentives.
Do you have that information?
I don't know that I'll be truthful, I don't know that it's stated that well in the wording in the settlement, but that was the general agreement.
We've got the agreement. We can go back and check, but in terms of the discussions that we had back and forth between the various parties, those would not be in the record. Those would have been kept confidential pursuant to settlement negotiations.
That's why I asked if we had it. It was something that was
The IC memos would have not.
record, but
The IC memos would not have gone into that type of detail.
In all honesty, as we were having discussions in the way we were, just talking in general during those times, it was just always about the program cost, and that was the assumption moved on.
okay, I don't want to get into how the settlement was
I understand.
reached. I was just curious if there was some determination that was made. That's my only question.
No, sir.
Mr. Matthews, questions?
No questions.
I don't know anything about West Perry Elementary School other than that's a new school that was started, or I guess probably they had property was purchased from Kentucky Power Company. No, Kentucky Power Company had an option, or tried to get an option on property on the Hal Rogers Parkway. Mr. Rogers has now superseded Daniel Boone.
Yes.
In fame and glory. So that project would have been in the planning stage since 2014, 2015. But how long will it take you to get your data request in writing or something, Mr. Rogers?
I'll try to do that by the end of the day.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask Mr. Warnhouse two more questions?
Yes, you may, certainly.
And I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just,
No, that's
I didn't
fine.
know if we were moving past that. Just very quickly. Mr. Chandler was asking you about West Perry, and the chairman was referring to it, and I understand you're going to provide a post-hearing data request. But it's true that West Perry is on the wait list, is that correct?
Yes,
And when was that wait list status created?
in June of 2017.
Okay. And then Ms. Tauber asked you about the company's new methodology for calculating the DSM factor. Do you remember
Yes,
that
I do.
discussion? Have you reviewed Mr. Gravat's testimony in this case?
I have.
And is it true that he makes certain recommendations about how the company should change its methodology to provide rate stability?
He does.
And is this new methodology consistent with his recommendations?
We believe so, yes.
And then finally, in connection with this new methodology, when did the company set out to develop this new methodology?
We started in late 2016 after we had submitted the factor for what was in effect during 2017. We realized that we needed to make a change. So we started working that prior to the initiation of this proceeding even.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Anyone have any other questions for this witness? If Mr. Overstreet, if Mr. Chandler can have his data request to you by this afternoon, could they be answered by next Tuesday?
May I turn and ask?
Yes, you may.
We should be able to get it by Friday, shouldn't we?
Friday's tomorrow.
Oh, this is Thursday already. Okay. Yeah. We should be able to no later than Tuesday. If we can get it sooner, we'll do it sooner.
Well, I don't know that Mr. Chandler is as superhuman as he is, can get it to you any quicker than this afternoon, since it's already 6 minutes to 1.
But we can start, we know generally what Mr. Chandler wants. We'll start contacting them and getting the information, and then we'll just see the words when they come.
Okay, thank you. If there's nothing else from Mr. Wanhurst, is there anything else that any party would like to bring before the commission at this time?
Just one thing, Your Honor. We have not talked to other parties, but based on today, Sierra Club would like to request the opportunity to provide poster and briefing. I don't believe it was a discussion either way. It was in the order, so I just wanted to present it before we adjourn for the day.
Let me tell you what our problem is with that. It's timing. We have a lot of cases going forward and coming into the bottom of the funnel within the next month or two. And in this case, the rate case is the time in which it must be decided is the 18th, which is, one day next week, maybe next Friday. And Thursday. We'd like to be able to get all of these, and we've got Duke Energy has come in with a rate case, and Louisville Gas and Electric and Kentucky Utilities has come in with a DSM case, and all of these others, in order to provide some consistency, we'd like to get them decided, roughly about the same time, so the ratepayers and the companies would know where everyone stood. If you could get a brief, you're not going to get a transcript because it's all videoed, but and I think we know what everyone's position is because your witness is very articulate and you've done a good job in presenting his position. Could you get a brief in here by next Tuesday, next Wednesday, something? It has to be just in sort of an outline short form. There's not a lot to argue, I think, that we don't know.
Sure. I think certainly at the.
If you could get it by the end of the day, Tuesday or midnight, Tuesday or something, or 11:55 p.m. whatever Tuesday. I don't care, but we need to get something because we need to start working on these orders now. We'll certainly consider there won't be any final decision until we see what everyone has written. Would you like to file something as well, Mr. Overstreet?
Yes, although it may not rise to the status of a brief, but we'll certainly.
Well, and it doesn't need to. I don't think any party ought to file whatever their counsel thinks serves the best interest of your client. Mm-hmm. Mr. Chandler, Mr. Mammy, each of you think you'll file something?
I believe we will file something. I think it will be, as Mr. Overstreet described it, I'll call it a brief, but it'll probably look more like comments. But I think we will take the commission up on the offer.
Right. Thank you.
My well is run dry.
I think it's unlikely that we'll file a brief, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Well, I appreciate your consideration, too. because I know you all have come in and done a good job, and I think what you've done has helped us tremendously, all of the parties in council, and we certainly appreciate it. Is there anything else anyone would like to say or bring to the attention of the commission?
Just on that, just to make sure it's a timely submission, so just to clarify, as long as it's uploaded by...
Yeah, as long as it's, as long as you can send it out. We had a lawyer in here a month or so ago, and there were several parties, and I think he wanted to wait until the very last, so he's sure no one could see his brief. And he tried to file it at like sometime between 11 p.m. and midnight. And guess what? His server went down or something, so then he had to file it. And anyway, we accommodated him, but that's right. As long as you get it in sometime, it'll be fine. Okay. Thank you very much. If there's nothing else, then this hearing will stand adjourned.